Hello and welcome to Clock Spinning, the podcast of Magic's history as told card by card. I'm Austin, and with me, as always, is Connor. How are you today, Connor?
I'm doing pretty well, Austin. It's morning when we're recording this, and there's a lot more light in the room than I'm used to, a lot more coffee on the desk than I'm used to drinking when we record, but
Not enough coffee, though, for me.
No, not for it's not even that early, but it's so much earlier than we have ever recorded before. It feels strange.
I was telling you in the pre-record that I feel like my lips themselves are not like warmed up, like my lips aren't limber from talking, and so hopefully the listeners can still hear us through our unlimbered lips and sleepy tongues.
Yeah. Well,
I'm
these
sorry
are some
for
of our
saying
first.
sleepy tongues.
Yeah, please, let's move on from sleepy tongues.
Yeah,
what are we talking about today?
Yeah, we are here to talk about Goyfs. If you're not familiar with Clock Spinning is a Magic history podcast where we tell the story of Magic by going card by card, really deep. And today we're doing that with Goyfs in honor of Modern Horizons 3. So we're going to talk about every single Lhurgoyf that's ever been printed. Oh, and a big shout out to Zacharoni and Cheese over on YouTube who suggested this topic in a comment. And by the way, if you, the listener, have any ideas you'd like to see us explore, and really nothing is too obscure, we did 30 minutes just on Graxaplon, so we're happy to go deep. Just let us know in a comment, and we'll add it to our backlog of episode ideas.
Yeah, thank you, Zacharoni and Cheese, and we do love getting any ideas that you have, so send them our way. Without further ado, let's get goyfing.
Let's get goyfing. All right, first up today, we have the original Lhurgoyf, which is Lhurgoyf. Lhurgoyf is from Ice Age. It's 2GG. It is a summon Lhurgoyf in Ice Age terminology, or creature Lhurgoyf today. It is a star/1+star. And Lhurgoyf's power is equal to the number of creature cards in all graveyards, and its toughness is equal to that number +1. And then it's got this, I think it's fair to say, iconic flavor text. Ach, Hans, run! It's the Lhurgoyf! Safi Eriksdottir, last words. And I think it's just that the way I first encountered Lhurgoyf, so we came into Magic pre-internet, right? Or pre-internet for us, except for like AOL chat rooms. I had a childhood awe of Lhurgoyf, Connor. I think almost as much as Black Lotus, maybe more than Black Lotus, certainly far more than the Moxes, Library of Alexandria, Dual Lands, Wasteland, all these cards we know today are much, much better than Lhurgoyf. And I think a lot of it is just the aesthetics of this card. This wasn't the first Magic card that scared me because Onslaught was a disgusting block full of like super gross things like Call to the Grave, Carrion Feeder, Gem Palm Polluter. But Lhurgoyf, both mechanically, but especially like artistically, feels like a sort of forbidden monster from like an eldritch horror story, right? It's like got this alien look. It's feeding on the dead. It feels sort of scary and titillating, like Roald Dahl or John Belair's, one of those other kind of children's horror adjacent things. Like Lhurgoyf to me, as a comparative child encountering Magic, like epitomized that Magic was sort of adult and dangerous and spooky and not always easy to explain.
100% agree with that. I think especially having Lhurgoyf, like looking at the original Ice Age printing here, having that oldest border with the card text in how would you even describe that? Like it's almost like this board that's just been
it's like painted on a signboard.
Yeah. There's something very kind of raw and unpolished about it, much more so than like the classic old border that you and I grew up with that we had in Onslaught and before that too. That makes Lhurgoyf feel even more kind of alien and threatening, but in a kind of exciting way.
It's the frame, as you're saying. It's like that line, summon Lhurgoyf, like not knowing. I think I first encountered Lhurgoyf in like a battered Ice Age starter deck that I found as a Goodwill. And like as context here, like we're encountering all this kind of pre-internet. I know Magic has some kind of prehistory, but we started playing in Onslaught. I don't really know what all that is. And so I'm flipping through these cards and none of them make much sense to me because they're all written kind of weird and the frames look weird and everything about them's kind of strange. And then I get to Lhurgoyf, and it's like summon Lhurgoyf. What is that? What is a Lhurgoyf? What is a summon? Why is the frame like this? Why is it so scary? Which again is kind of like almost this Lovecraftian eldritch origin point, right? It's like this battered ancient artifact that I've uncover. I hope I'm not over egging it, but like sort of genuinely, I think Lhurgoyf is part of what got me into like Magic history and maybe ultimately this podcast. Like this card looms large, my personal history of Magic.
Wow, that is a lot of power in this 4-mana summon
It is.
Lhurgoyf. But I think you're totally right. It almost felt like you were looking at a card from a different game where there maybe weren't as many rules about what can or can't be on a card, how scary something can be, whether you can have a creature pulling, I guess, what looks like an already dead guy out of the snow by his head, but he's still in excruciating pain somehow.
Yeah, it's really, that part is really
It's
unsettling. I
scary
don't
stuff.
actually know what's going on there. Okay, so we've been sort of nodding
Yeah.
at the art. I think like to actually talk about the card and set, beyond our experience with it, like one of the things I think that really works about this card on a design level is that it's this great marriage of the art, the mechanics, the kind of other little tidbits of the card, and the flavor text. Like every aspect of this card is supporting every other aspect. Like having this weird type line. There's at this point nothing in Magic that's a Lhurgoyf or in the world. Like this is a new word. There's nothing after this for years. There will not be another Lhurgoyf for like 5 years. So we have like the birth of a new tribe. We have this like idea of something that eats the dead, and you can see that in the art. It's implied in the flavor text, and then also the mechanics like really support this idea. The more things die, the bigger the Lhurgoyf gets, as we famously know about Tarmogoyf. Like it's all sort of building together and fitting together in this really elegant way.
Yeah. I also really love that, and this is kind of the first time I've thought of this, but I love that Lhurgoyf is green.
Yeah.
Like the effect is sort of the effect and the art and the like overall feel of Lhurgoyf definitely read as like a black card when you first encounter it. But this is like a green creature, and it gives this more frightening edge to a color that I think at least when we started playing Magic was more like, oh, this is the color of elves and like beasts roaming
Yeah,
around
this
the
is the kind of
forest.
hippie color.
Yeah, this is sort of the friendly, like, oh, let's make mana and find land color. And then here's this horrible creature just like ripping bodies out of the snow and like devouring the dead.
It's a great shout actually, because now you say that, if I imagine this card in black, I don't know that it would have made as deep an impression on me. I think it would have been like, oh, another scary black card. They're all kind of scary.
Yeah.
From a design standpoint, one of the things that surprised me about Lhurgoyf when I started digging into its history is that this is far from the first star creature in Magic. Actually, of about 321 total star creatures, 5 of them appear in the very first alpha set. So in alpha, we have, hold on, Nightmare. We've got Animate Artifact. We've got Plague Rats. We have Keldon Warlord, and we have Gaia's Leech. So even with Alpha, Magic is already playing in this space fairly heavily. And actually, believe it or not, this is not even the first like toughness is equal to N plus a star creature. Gaia's Avenger from Antiquities, Shapeshifter from Antiquities, and Angry Mob from the Dark. Like 50 points if you know anything about Angry Mob. Oh, Angry Mob, right? Angry Mob.
Angry Mob.
You want me to read Angry Mob just because this will be the last time anyone reads it?
I don't even know what to expect. Yeah.
Angry Mob 2WW from the Dark. It is a creature human. It is 2+ star power, 2+ star toughness, trample. As long as it's your turn, Angry Mob's power and toughness are each equal to 2 plus the number of swamps your opponents control. As long as it's not your turn, Angry Mob's power and toughness are each 2. Classic Magic color hate design for you.
Yeah, that's fun.
I would say actually the most direct antecedent to this card is a card called Wall of Tombs from Legends, which is another really quirky N plus star kind of card. Wall of Tombstones. Wall of Tombstones is 1 and a black for a 0/1 plus 0/1 wall defender. And this is where it gets weird. At the beginning of your upkeep, change Wall of Tombstone's base toughness to 1 plus the number of creature cards in your graveyard. This effect lasts indefinitely. So that's just a little historical aside for you. It's like a variable power and toughness, but it gets set once a turn cycle like a clock. But all that is a long way to say Lhurgoyf is not alone in counting things and setting its power and toughness based on. It's not even alone in counting and setting based on the graveyard. What Lhurgoyf does represent, though, is a real beginning of interest in the graveyard. So Ice Age alone has 4 cards that count things in your graveyard. And since then, I'd say that's become a pretty important theme throughout Magic's history. So the other 4 cards, if you're curious, are Songs of the Damned, which is basically like a dark ritual that makes black mana based on the number of creatures in your graveyard. Spoils of War, which puts counters on creatures equal to creatures and artifacts in opponent's graveyard.
Okay.
And Spoils of Evil, which gives you mana and life equal to creatures and artifacts in your opponent's graveyard. So Wizards is starting to play in this space. And interestingly, looking a lot at your opponent's graveyard, not just yours, which I don't think Modern Magic would really do, honestly. Maybe if Lhurgoyf hadn't existed. Like, would Tarmogoyf look at your opponent's yard if Lhurgoyf didn't look at your opponent's yard? I'm not sure it would.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, but if we look at some of the future Goyfs, they follow this same theme. I wonder, like, what the turning point kind of was design wise that Wizards said, "Wait, stop looking at the other graveyard."
Yeah, all the Goyfs, or almost all, we'll talk about one that doesn't, almost all the Goyfs do, but I think sort of generally Wizards doesn't like doing that kind of thing today because it's just so hard to track.
Yeah, especially with Commander.
Okay, one question for you, Connor. Which art do you prefer? This Pete Venter's art or the 8th edition one that is also by Pete Venters?
I think it's got to be this original one. The 8th edition one is fine, but it feels so much more like sterilized, I guess.
Yeah.
I like that you're clearly looking at the same creature in the 8th edition one, but I think a lot of the magic is taken away from it not being in like a snowy environment. I think the like snowy background of the original Lhurgoyf here is part of the horror for me. It has this kind of terrifying loneliness to it that almost reminds me of movies like The Gray or The Revenant.
Yeah.
If you have seen those, where like part of the half of the horror of those movies and of looking at this Lhurgoyf for me is this sense of just utter solitude in this snowy wasteland, and that's almost as scary as the Lhurgoyf itself.
I totally agree. I think the other things that are different for me is that the creature, I think, looks much more enigmatic to me in the Ice Age one. Like in the 8th edition one, it's like a monster. In the Ice Age one, it's almost human. Like the way it's kind of like the alien from the Alien movies. Like if you look at its legs, it's crouched like a human, right? And its arms are like a human, but then above the neck, it gets all horrified. Like, so there, I think, which adds to the horrific. The 8th edition one, it's like the kind of weird edges have been filed off it, and it just looks like a monster. You know what? It kind of looks like a monster from the 3.5 monster manual.
It does. I was about to to call upon the monster manual. Yeah, this looks like something you'd read like the description of it in the monster manual and think like, yeah, maybe this could show up in an encounter someday, but I don't know when the players are ever going to encounter.
Yeah, it's got this sort of sterilized, like encyclopedic quality to it. Which actually, whereas the other one has a sort of like AD&D, basic D&D like weirdness. Like it's rougher, but I think the roughness really helps in this case. Also, all the line work, like I like how much more kind of emotive the line work is in the Ice Age one. Like there's a lot more blacks. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very dark and shadowy. Good stuff.
Good stuff indeed. Before we get to the rating, one more note. I like that this appears in a lot of cubes on the cube map, that wonderful Lucky Paper cube map, largely in like pre-modern and old border cubes, but it also appears in like a little island of ice-themed cubes. Something that really surprised me was this card has actually showed up in competitive Magic twice at the highest level. So it showed up in Worlds 1996 and Worlds 1997 inside the top 8, which is pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah, it showed up in a green-white Stompy deck and a mono-green Stompy deck. And something I especially loved about it is this card obviously has like super strong Scandinavian vibes, from like the name to the Safi Eriksdotter in the flavor text to the sort of ice-bound horror. And the thing I found lovely is the two pilots who brought it to Worlds, both Scandinavian. One is Swedish and one is Danish. So shout out to Oli Rade and Sven Gertsen.
That's pretty awesome.
Yep. A little bit of Viking spirit there.
Okay, so what are our ratings for Lhurgoyf? I feel like we can there's really only one letter we could possibly give it.
I agree. And for anyone who's new, we rate every card on that kind of YouTube classic S to F scale, where S is like best of the best, A, B, C, D, and then F for, the really lame ones. I don't think I'm surprising anyone when I say this is easily an S tier for me. Honestly, it would be an S plus if we allowed for that kind of shenanigans.
We can't go that far yet.
No.
Yeah, Lhurgoyf is definitely an S, though.
All right, fun card to start on.
Our next card and the very next Lhurgoyf in Magic's history is a much less fun card for me to start on. This is Cantivore. So this is one white for a star, of course. It's a Lhurgoyf. Cantivore has vigilance, and its power and toughness are each equal to the number of enchantment cards in all graveyards. And of course, the original printing of this says attacking doesn't cause Cantivore to tap, instead of saying that it has vigilance, because that keyword didn't exist until I think it was Kamigawa, right?
Yep.
Anyway, Cantivore for me is a pretty major letdown after the big guy himself with the original Lhurgoyf. I think mechanically Cantivore is just completely unenticing for me. It's hard to imagine in a typical game of Magic where you would have a scenario where there'd be even one enchantment in anyone's graveyard on turn 3, which is when you would want to play Cantivore. They just don't go there that often, and at least for most enchantments, the idea is that you have them stick around for a while, and part of what makes them a little difficult to work with sometimes, or a little lower power, is that they have no value once your opponent's gotten rid of them, and typically they have no value as they come into play. So Cantivore is it's asking you to set up a scenario that you're, I think, most of the time not going to want to set up, and on your opponent's side for their graveyard, you're kind of counting on them to have enchantments for you to get rid of, and also probably including more enchantment hate in your deck than you otherwise would, to try to beef up your vigilant Cantivore just a little bit more. So he just does not come together in any way for me.
Yeah, exactly the same for me mechanically. Like, it's, the difficulty is, as you're saying, it's playing with the card type that's least likely to end up in the graveyard, right? Like, creatures end up in the graveyard all the time.
Yeah.
That's just part of their life cycle. Lands, it's harder, but there's plenty of lands that sack themselves. Instants and sorceries obviously go to the graveyard on resolution. And as you said, an enchantment is basically doing its job by sitting on the battlefield. There are a handful of exceptions, like the seals come to mind, like Seal of Fire, which is like our enchantment, sack it, deal 2 damage to any target. Totem armors, umbras, like there are a handful, but most of them are pretty bad, and they're spread across a lot of colors. And there's almost certainly something better you could be doing if you're going to be putting that much work into it than getting maybe a 4/4 for 3 with vigilance out of the deal. Like, I think at that point you just want to play like an enchantress deck or something.
Yeah.
I think it's notable, 2 things that are notable. So this is the beginning of a cycle. There are 5 of these in Odyssey. They all care about a different type of card. So white cares about enchantments. I don't think this is a huge spoiler to say blue cares about instants, black about creatures, red about sorceries, and green about lands. All 4 of the other ones have seen some high-level competitive play. Cantivore has, as far as I can see, never seen any play in any format. It is by far the least loved card in this whole cycle.
Yeah. It's funny. I was reading Cantivore, and I was trying to think, wasn't there some archetype or theme recently that cared about enchantments being in graveyards? And I remembered it was Wilds of Eldraine, the Orzhov archetype, the white-black archetype,
Oh,
had a
that's
little
right. That's right.
sort of theme of caring about when enchantments go to graveyards. And I was thinking Cantivore would actually sort of fit into that archetype, but I think that was a bit of a flop competitively. I think there were a couple of cards that did okay in limited or something, but that's the one setting where I could kind of see Cantivore getting a little bit more attention, maybe, as if you were somehow playing a deck that was where you were actively trying to get enchantments into your graveyard. But even then, I mean, the payoff is a 3-mana 4/4 maybe, or 5/5 if you get really lucky, and it has vigilance, not flying or trample or anything really helpful.
This is actually one of your classic magic cards that look like they're flying, but they don't have flying.
It is.
Because he looks like he's sort of riding on bolts of lightning.
Yeah. What do you think of this art overall? I have my feelings, but I want to hear yours.
Oh, I mean, I don't think anything of it. It's I kind of want to hear yours, but my sort of short version is, if you look at the Pete Venters Ice Age Lhurgoyf next to this, this is such a letdown.
Mm-hmm.
I would say there's nothing wrong with it on a technical level. It just doesn't feel like a Lhurgoyf. It doesn't seem to be inspired by the design of the original Lhurgoyf in any way. It's not very scary looking. It's not really very white looking. It's not really working for me on any level. I think the only thing that works is the lightning kind of evokes enchantment, I guess. but I just don't like it. Like I don't like the giant tail behind it. I don't like the sort of meaningless cloud background. I don't like that there's zero sense of scale here.
Hmm.
Also, like, is this thing 500 feet tall or is it 5 feet tall? There is actually no way to
Yeah,
tell.
I think that last one has been a surprisingly common complaint for both of us. I think in the various episodes of the show that we've done. I remember what was it, like Arcanus the Omnipotent? I think
That's right.
this blue card from Onslaught, right?
I went through many years of my life thinking Arcadus was like 45 feet
Yeah, I mean,
tall.
he looks gigantic, and Cantivore is the same way, where you can't tell. I mean, it looks like he could be maybe, I don't know, 20 feet above the ground. It also looks like, especially with the lightning bolts added in, he could be 1,000 feet tall, like some Eldrazi
He
creature.
could also be like a 14-inch long
Yeah,
squirrel.
you just don't know. Maybe this is just a little bit of static coming out of his little spike arms. Yeah, I don't like this art at all. I guess, to be fair, at this point in Magic there had only been one Lhurgoyf, so I can't really say that like this
That's
doesn't
true.
align with what a Lhurgoyf is supposed to look like. To me, this really reads as like a sliver with too many arms, not a Lhurgoyf,
Yes.
right? Like this looks like a sliver that you put kind of I'll admit that the skull thing is sort of cool looking, but it's like you just slap that and some feathers and too many extra appendages onto a sliver and ended up here.
Like, I just look at this and I'm like, this is so forgettable.
Yeah. Well, should we forget it and move on?
Well, no, we need to rate it. And then I have one other design
I
note.
didn't even want to do that.
It doesn't even deserve it. I have one other design note, which is I think it's notable that this is the only card in all of Magic that counts the number of enchantments in your graveyard.
Wow.
By contrast, there are 7 or so that count artifacts, 9 that count lands, 25 that count sorceries, 25 that count instants, and 60 that count creatures, just roughly. And I think that says something about like this is a failed design space.
Yeah.
Like, in 20 years of WotC throwing a lot of stuff at the wall, especially the last couple of years, they've never felt a need to count enchantments in graveyards ever again.
I'm really glad you found that, because when I was thinking of the Wilds of Eldraine thing, I was looking at cards that cared about enchantments just anywhere in text box, and I was like, I could have sworn there was some card in here that like cared how many enchantments you have in the graveyard and like gets better, because I was trying to find something like a more interesting modern card to compare Cantivore to. So I'm glad you
Yeah.
found that it just doesn't exist. That makes me
It
feel
doesn't
better.
yeah. Yeah, because it's just fundamentally doesn't work well with the design space enchantments are meant to occupy.
Yeah, even in a set where enchantments matter.
Right. It is actually tied, I should say, with a more modern type, which is Planeswalker. There is one card that cares about number of Planeswalkers in graveyards, and I think that makes sense. That's also a permanent card type that you want to have on the battlefield. There aren't cards that ask you to cycle Planeswalkers over and over through the battlefield like there are creatures.
Yeah.
All right, what is your rating on this, Connor?
I think Cantivore is a D for me. I can't drop quite to F. I'm not sure why. I guess because it could be worse, and it's still a Lhurgoyf. So I'm gonna land on D.
I had it a D, but the more we talked about it, I'm dropping this thing down to an F.
Ooh.
Like, there's just nothing to like in this card. I can't think of anything I like about it.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right, let's go on to Cognivore. Cognivore is 6 UU for a creature Lhurgoyf, star for the power and toughness. Flying, and Cognivore's power and toughness are each equal to the number of instant cards in all graveyards. So honestly, it's hard to see anything else about this card when you look at it at first, except the cost. 8 mana is,
It's a showstopper.
yeah. I think my brain almost unconsciously inserts Delve like into the text box here because it just feels like it's supposed to have Delve or some other kind of cost reduction mechanic. But nope, this is just a straight up 8 mana card.
It is a lot of mana symbols on there for this guy.
I think all I can imagine is that WotC was very scared of this effect. This was an era of Magic that was very dominated by off the battlefield interaction, right? Like, this is an era of insanely powerful instants, like Counterspell, obviously, but even in extended at this point, you could still play with Brainstorm. You have Factor Fiction, you have Living Wish, you have Force Spike, Accumulated Knowledge. Like, this is an era of really, really powerful instants This is an era where blue does not need any help at all, and I think you see that reflected in this cost. But I also wonder if WotC was just sort of scared of the kind of fundamental power of instants, in the sense that like they didn't touch this design space again for a really long time. Like we see a lot of this effect nowadays. We see basically one every year or two with like I don't know, Connor, what are some of the modern ones? I'm suddenly blanking. There's like so many.
Haughty Jin is the immediate comparison that came to mind from Dominaria United. That's a 3-mana star power 4 toughness flyer that I think only counts your own graveyard, but it's, I believe, instants and sorceries, and it reduces the cost of instants and sorceries by 1. So like,
Yeah,
compared to
exactly.
Cognivore, it's a pretty rough for this little floating cloud thing.
Yeah, Crackling Drake, Enigma Drake, Smoldering Stagecoach, a lot of other stuff in this design space now, all cheaper. I think it is notable, as you said, that they all count only your own graveyard. It kind of speaks to my earlier thing, that contention that Wizards doesn't really like this counting both graveyards business. I think for a bunch of reasons, like it's harder to balance, it's harder to track.
The harder to balance thing is a good point. Like it's a lot more difficult to predict how powerful a card is going to be, or how disruptive it'll be to a particular meta when, you know, it's counting on things that your opponent is doing.
A little bit of fun fact for you. This is the only card in Magic that counts only instants, and Mantivore, which we're going to talk about in a second, is the only card that counts only sorceries in your graveyard. All the rest of the cards that count instant sorceries in your graveyard count both, which is a little bit of trivia for you.
Yeah, it's an interesting split. Like there's this whole you know, I'm not sure we even mentioned yet, but Cantivore and Cognivore are both part of a cycle of Lhurgoyfs, a 5-color cycle of Lhurgoyfs from Odyssey. Did we say that already?
I think I said it at
Okay.
some point. Don't worry, we'll fix
yeah,
this.
we'll get it in there. So Cognivore is the blue one, but you can really see between Cognivore and Magnivore the red counterpart, just this very, very clear color pie division, where blue is about instant, red is about sorcery, white is about enchantment, and there's kind of so little nuance in the way that these Lhurgoyfs of different colors are treated mechanically.
Yeah, there is, and I think it also like I give WotC modern. I have a lot of complaints with modern Magic about the complexity of modern card design, the number of mechanics, the number of knobs that they're obviously turning to power a card up and down. I think this cycle arguably shows there could be a downside to too much simplicity, and in particular to too much worry about parallel design. Like all 5 of these cards count only one type of thing. They all essentially have a keyword mechanic, and they all have star. None of them have like plus anything. And I think it leads to a little bit of like it doesn't quite work. It means that they're not all as interesting. Some of them could use a little bit more power, or a little bit more synergy, or something more fun to do.
I do like that Cognivore is twice as expensive as everybody else, though.
Yeah, they were really scared. But what if the white one, for example, 8 enchantments for some kind of benefit, like for life? I'm making this up, right? But like you could have powered up Cantivore or turned it into a mini enchantment sacrificing engine or something, and I don't think it would have felt out of place.
Yeah. I feel like
Is that 2024?
I think that is maybe a little too 2024. I was thinking or looking forward a little bit to some of the more modern Goyfs we have, like Necrogoyf or Urborg Lhurgoyf, the most difficult one to say. Where they kind of have like built-in ways to power themselves up and to kind of enable themselves that, you know, I think most cards in this past era of Magic, this Odyssey era that we're looking at right now, like that just didn't have.
Yeah, it's so interesting from a design standpoint, like because I see pros and cons to both. One of the things that reminds me, like we didn't really mention, Odyssey was kind of the graveyard block. Really the first super heavy graveyard themed set, I think it's fair to say, in Magic's history. And I think what a great choice to bring back this old iconic Goyf creature type for this big graveyard block.
Yeah.
Although I gotta say, I got a little bit of a beef with these names, these something Vor names. I feel like they're hiding a little bit the Lhurgoyf. Like Lhurgoyf, the only thing Goyfy about these, maybe this is a good pivot to the art. The only thing Goyfy about really any of these cards, but certainly this card, is that it says Lhurgoyf in the type line. Like if you took Lhurgoyf off of this, I don't know, I would assume it was called like dream monster or something like this. Like, it probably would have a better name than that. But you don't like. There's nothing goyfy about this card at all.
Yeah, not at all. I do like this art, and we could talk about that a little bit later. But there's nothing with most of these. There's nothing that like suggests a tie to the original Lhurgoyf, other than that type line.
Okay, so about the art, what do you think about the art, Connor?
I actually really like this art, and I certainly like it quite a bit more than Cantivore. I think this one is maybe the furthest thing from a Goyf out of all the cards that we'll see, at least in my mind. But there's something just kind of like goofy about Cognivore. Like it looks almost cheerful and innocent if you look closely at the art. Like it's not a sinister looking creature other than I guess all these nasty teeth and big horns and stuff. Like the art sort of looks like a fantasy storybook for kids.
But if you zoom in, it's like feeding off of the minds of these people in the background.
Yeah, but they don't really seem to be that bothered by it. Cognivore is having a great time.
Yeah, I mean, one of them seems to be kind of an erectus of agony, but other than that
No, I
person,
mean, you can't please
maybe they're
everyone.
dancing.
You can't make everybody
It's a
happy
Dominarian dance
all the time.
Yeah, I really like this art as well, even though it has nothing. I guess the thing that is goyfy about it compared to, say, Cantivore, is that it is eating something.
Yeah.
In this case, thoughts. None of these other goyfs that in Odyssey are eating anything.
That's very
which
true.
is a real disappointment.
Though I would think I guess I don't know how much real basis there is for this in magic art historically, but I've always thought of like the mind, like the a person's mind as being associated with the hand, like your hand of cards as opposed to the graveyard.
I think that's pretty solid, yes.
So art-wise, it almost looks like Cognivore would be caring about the number of cards in players' hands, which would be a great, great card for Saviors of Kamigawa. But
it sure would. Well, that's an interesting little question. What do instants in a graveyard? What are they?
Yeah, like what happens to them? You assume they just kind of an instant is just a spell that ceases to exist when you're finished casting it, but it's still something.
I'm trying to think. There are loads of cards that count instants and sorceries in graveyards, but now that we're talking about it, I don't feel like any. They don't really explain why, right? Like Crackling Drake or something. Like, there's nothing in there that says why they're caring about what's in the yard.
Yeah, there's
it's
no
just
like
kind of
flavor.
It's just there. Yeah,
part of the card.
It's an interesting little hole. One more fun note before we rate this. This does have one pretty notable competitive appearance in Pro Tour Houston 2002. This took the #1 winning spot in a 351 player extended event, which is pretty cool that anyone managed to bring this to the top of any competitive Magic event. That was in a Oath of Druids list. It's a pretty fun list. So there's only 2 creatures in the main board, 2 Cognivores, nothing else. So the plan is basically to use all the broken instants I alluded to earlier: Accumulated Knowledge, Brainstorm, Counterspell, Foff, Foil, Forbid, Force Spike, Intuition, Corrosive Reclamation, Living Wish, and Mana Leak, to basically stall your opponent out of the game, and then you oath into a Cognivore and beat down, which seems like a pretty fun game plan to me. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that sounds really fun to play against.
Yeah, well, this era of Magic wasn't too worried about that. One other fun little bit of tech, I mentioned that it has a Living Wish in the main. So we've got 2 Living Wish in the main, and that's fetching Gilded Drake or Masticore or Palancron out of the side for some Wishboard tech. Which again is pretty cool. And then I found an SCG article that actually said this was a one-off, and then bounce. Basically, people responded by adding bounce, and your Cognivore plan looked pretty stupid after that, because you had really no path to casting it, right? You had to oath it. So once it goes to your hand, you're in trouble.
It's over. Poor Cognivore.
I know. But he had a moment to shine.
Yeah, much more of a shine than I would have expected just from reading this card.
All right, so what's your rating on this thing, Connor?
I give Cognivore an A. I think mostly on the strength of the art. There's something charming about it for me.
It's kind of Rebecca Guay-like, actually.
A little bit.
I give it a B. I think it's a fun card. I don't know that I'll really remember it a year from now, but it's. I like the art. I like some of the design space it plays in. It's pretty fun.
Yeah. All right. Okay, let's continue our Odyssey through the Odyssey Lhurgoyfs with Mortivore. This is 2 BB for a star Lhurgoyf, of course. Mortivore's power and toughness are each equal to the number of creature cards in all graveyards. Should sound pretty familiar. And then you can pay 1 black mana to regenerate Mortivore. So this is, of course, mechanically the same effect as the original Lhurgoyf. Mortivore ends up with 1 less toughness and regeneration, which I think is better almost all the time. I want to say. And to me, this is the first card we've seen since the original Lhurgoyf that actually kind of looks goyfy to me. This is completely subjective, and I realize every time I say that something looks or does not look like a Lhurgoyf, it's like coming from my own, I guess.
Hey, it's your show, Connor.
It's my show. I have my mind picture of what a Lhurgoyf should look like, built up over 20 years of thinking about the original Lhurgoyf, and Mortivore feels closer to it.
I don't think that's crazy though, because when we get to the other really notable Goyf, I think you all know which one I'm talking about. There is a very clear, direct inspiration on that Goyf from the original Lhurgoyf.
Yeah, but don't you think Mortivore looks a little closer to that original Lhurgoyf?
Yes. I do.
Yeah.
I do. I agree. This is the most Goyfy of the Odyssey Goyfs. Actually, maybe Magnivore a little bit too. I think this one is. I like the art a lot. I think it's again like it's not as scary as the original Lhurgoyf. Again, I'm like, this is an impossible bar to clear, maybe because I couldn't have. Well, I guess I could have seen this when I was 12, but you know what I mean. There's just something. It doesn't look as alien. It looks more sort of standard issue. But it's a nice piece of art.
Yeah, it's much more on the nose horror than
that's a great word.
The original Lhurgoyf. It's just like, oh, this is scary because there's like bones and glowy blue stuff and a big spooky moon in the background.
Scary. Yep. I do like the glowy blue stuff. Like if you zoom in on the art crop on Odyssey or on Scryfall, it's he's really succeeded. Anthony S. Waters here has really succeeded, like kind of creating this glow from within look, which is pretty tricky, I think, to do, especially in traditional media.
Yeah, and it's really cool looking with the glow of the moon behind it.
It's pretty badass, I think it's fair to say.
I think that's absolutely fair to say. All that said, though, Mortivore is a pretty boring card to me. It feels like WotC or maybe Mark Rosewater or whoever came up with this cycle of Lhurgoyfs just couldn't really think of anything else to do with a black Lhurgoyf other than to rehash the original one and put regeneration on it instead of the 1 toughness. I'm not sure what other direction I would have gone with the black Lhurgoyf at this point, but it's like do something a little different.
Yeah, it kind of gets back to this like cycle tyranny here, which incidentally Odyssey in general has this Odyssey is a weird block. It's like simultaneously extremely Mark Rosewatery in that it's clearly in love with the idea of magic design, and the flavor is kind of goofy. Actually, we should get back to goofy flavor because I think it's a key part of why these cards exist at all. But it's also got this sort of like spiky, like excessive symmetry. Like there are loads of cycles in Odyssey. They're all very symmetrical. They're like everything's in service to the graveyard theme. And I think this cycle, it would sort of like Cantivore, this would be a stronger card if it was not narrowly following the like 1 keyword mechanic, power toughness equal to number of n things, in, like this permanent type in graveyards. Like it's really limited.
Yep.
Speaking of flavor, I realized I should have brought this in at the start. I think the reason we have more than just the original Ice Age Lhurgoyf is basically down to the flavor text. Mark Rosewater loves this card. If you look on Blogatog, there are more references to this card than any of the Goyfs we're going to talk about, including Tarmogoyf. There's like 10 pages of search results about Tarmogoyf, and about 50 or Lhurgoyf, and about 50% of them are Mark Rosewater saying, "My favorite flavor text of all time is Ah Khan's Run. It's the Lhurgoyf," over and over every time someone asks him. And I think like Mark was the leading designer on Odyssey, and I feel like having a cycle of Goyfs in here has to be Mark Rosewater doing a nod at one of his favorite cards of all time.
Yeah.
And again, like without that, I think when they did the big creature type cleanup, if these don't exist, probably Lhurgoyf just becomes summoned like creature beast. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you had found a post from Blogatog, right? Where I think it was like 2014 or something, where Mark Rosewater was basically saying like the creature type, the Lhurgoyf creature type is probably the biggest obstacle to us having more Goyfs.
Yeah.
or reprinting
Yeah,
any of
exactly.
these.
It's because WotC didn't really like this for the longest time. I think now they're more open to weirdness like this, but there was a long time when they were really trying to like clean up the untidy edges of Magic.
Yeah. Yeah. So without this cycle, I don't think we'd have any Goyfs of any type or
Huh.
any variety in modern Magic.
We might never have gotten Tarmogoyf. How weird is that?
Yeah.
Huh. One weird thing about this card, you and I aren't big EDH players. We're more cubers and like old school kitchen table kind of players. This card has a shockingly high play rate in EDH, considering what it does. It's the highest of any card in this episode by like a wide margin. There's like 8,000 decks that feature this card. That's against like 2,000 for Tarmogoyf, 3,000 for Lhurgoyf, 5,000 for Urborg Lhurgoyf. So
Wow.
this thing's got some kind of role in EDH, I guess, just as a thing that does something you want, right? Like there's a lot of creatures dying in EDH. Like you don't have to overthink it, I guess.
You have like a 4-mana 40/40 that is just regenerating all the time and impossible to get rid of.
And also the most reprinted of any card here, except for Tarmogoyf. This has been
Really?
printed surprising number of, well, actually, hold on. A bunch of these are promo prints from 10th edition variants and Solvat. Never mind. It's been reprinted like 3 times, but that's still more than any of the other Vores we're going to talk about.
And the art still works with the new border too.
It's funny you say that because I was just looking at both, and it's like this is the rare card that sings in both borders. Because I think most cards look better, distinct. Like if you put the Ice Age Lhurgoyf in the modern border, it would look pretty terrible.
Yeah, we could see that with like the 30th anniversary prints. Like those just look awful, but Mortivore makes it work. Okay, where do you land rating wise on Mortivore? I've got him at a B. I feel like there's nothing really to adore about Mortivore, but the art is cool and it's got some EDH cred.
I had him as a B as well. I think I'm going to downgrade it to a C just because there's nothing wrong with it, but it just I wanted to, you know what, like I want to incentivize Mortivore to try harder in future. You know, like he clearly kind of showed up here without much of a plan. He didn't do a lot of studying for the exam.
That's fair. You don't want to just hand out a B.
Yeah, exactly. I want to give him a free B. You know, B lets him skate, right? If I gave him an A, that'd obviously be wrong. A B lets him tell himself that he did enough, and he didn't. I want him to try harder.
Okay, that's fair.
I want him to apply himself. All right, let's go to the red one, Magnivore. Magnivore is 2RR for a, ready for this, Connor, creature Lhurgoyf.
Oh.
Power, toughness, star. It's got haste, and its power and toughness are each equal to the number of sorcery cards in all graveyards. We're pretty hard on this whole Vor cycle. I mean, this one to me is the most like, yes, this is a card, maybe of all of them. Caring about sorceries is I don't know, is that actually more boring? I think it's more boring than caring about enchantments, Connor. Because like caring about enchantments is weird. It does get my brain turned, like as soon as I saw Cantivore, my brain went, how do I get enchantments in the graveyard? That's an interesting deck building puzzle. I think when I see Magnivore, I'm just like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, just it feels really incomplete to me. Like I was trying to imagine the deck that I would want Magnivore in, and I know there's some like a little bit of competitive history to this guy that I didn't really bother like looking into it all.
Work. I could report on
that.
Yeah,
other than to know that it exists. But just thinking theory crafting about Magnivore, I was thinking, where do you want this guy? Like, would you have like a mono red burn deck where the majority of your burn spells are sorceries? And then you use Magnivore as a hasty but non-evasive finisher. Like it feels like there's not enough on this card. Like there's not enough that's being counted for Magnivore to matter. Like how many sorceries are you even playing in a normal deck?
Well, I'm glad you asked this, Connor, because more creative minds than ours were thinking about this in 9th edition standard. And this did see a smattering of competitive play in blue-red Ponza lists.
Wait, this was in 9th edition?
Yeah, I don't know why anyone at WotC thought this deserved it. For some reason, this got reprinted in 9th edition. And then in 9th edition, it saw a smattering of play in like blue-red decks that were like Stone Rain.
Okay.
Yeah, see, right? Demolish, which is like a 4-mana destroy target artifact or land. Eye of Nowhere to bounce your land. Pyroclasm to wipe your board. Wildfire, which also was inexplicably in 9th edition, right?
Okay, so this does
it was like a land destruction counter spelly deck with Magnivore as the only creature, which honestly sounds pretty dope. Like props to that. I wish I could have played that. That sounds kind of fun.
I might have to change my rating here.
Really, you're going to go up just on that? I feel like we should do just casually. We should do like a kind of because we're finding all these weird decks from this era. I kind of want to do like a pre-modern standard deck face off or something with like Magnivore, horrible, painful Magnivore deck versus horrible, painful Cognivore deck. Which is better, Connor? Instants or sorceries? Let's settle this
Vor
once
v
and for all.
Vor.
This card is part of a really minor theme of red caring about sorceries but not about instants. When I say very minor, there's about 167 total mono red cards that care about either instants or sorceries, and there are 11 that care about only sorceries. So, or excuse me, 9. It's actually even less than I thought. 9,
Wow.
which are real quick. I'll just rattle them off for anyone who's curious, and then I'll link a search. Backdraft from Legends, Lightning Reflexes from Mirage, Anarchist from Exodus, Task Mage Assembly from Prophecy, Magnivore, and Recoup, also from Odyssey, Burning Wish from Judgment, Ken Burning Brawler, which I'm hesitant to even
Yeah.
count, and Oger Axonil Deepest Might from Lost Caverns of
Well, I
Ixalan.
don't think Axonal even counts, right? Because the only sorcery part of that is that the flip land Temple of Power can only be
Oh,
flipped back as a
you pwned me
sorcery.
on that. I thought I excluded all those. You're right. So it's only 8, which means 38% of all sorcery caring about red cards are in Odyssey block, which is just weird. Maybe they thought this was going to be a thing.
Yeah, maybe this was like a little test of, can we try making red more of the sorcery color and blue more of the instant color and have that work?
Yeah, maybe you're right. Will players be excited at this new division of Magic card types? The weirdest design thing about this card actually is that it cares about sorceries instead of artifacts. Like, doesn't that seem like obvious that the color of Atog would care about the number of artifacts in graveyards? Like, were they just scared?
Yeah, that is super weird. And I mean, if it did, it would obviously it'd be a very different conversation, I think.
Yeah, I think it'd be much more interesting. It would, yeah, it could have been an extended with Mirrodin block or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. And I think
Huh.
that would be a real card. Like there are a lot of artifacts that sacrifice themselves that just end up going to the graveyard for various reasons, and you have an
Yep.
incentive to play them that you just don't with sorceries most of the time, or as many sorceries.
Okay, I rated this at a D, which I think is pretty harsh, but reflects my. Oh, we didn't even talk about the art, which says a lot. Okay. Well, I've spoiled my rating, but what do you think about the art, Connor?
I hate it. I've never actually I'm really glad that you pointed out that there's a ninth edition printing of this, because we were just saying Mortivore's art really works in both borders. And I think Magnivore's art works in neither, but especially not in the modern ninth edition frame.
Yeah.
I've never been a huge fan of Carl Critchlow's work. A lot of the time it feels like very muddy and unfinished for me, and I think that's fine in, I don't know, in a book or something. I'm trying to think of where I would
I've got
see
one
art like
Carl
this.
Critchlow art I know you love.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for.
I have the gotcha. I already
Okay, all
prepared
right.
the
I'm glad
gotcha.
you prepared the gotcha, because I was thinking as I said this, I'm sure I've said on this show how much I love some Carl Critchlow piece of art.
Cursed Ronin from Champions of
Oh,
Kamigawa.
that is a good one.
It is a good one, but it makes sense there because that sketchy quality works in that
Yeah,
context.
yeah. Magnivore here, it just looks like mud. Like there's the Magnivore is this like blobby sort of creature with mouths in strange places and appendages of all different shapes and sizes. Like there's no real definition to this creature to begin with. And then Carl Critchlow's style, which is I would say like lacks clear definition to begin with, just kind of amplifies that for me.
It's kind of like an org. It looks more like an org
It
to
is
me.
kind of
ORGG.
Yeah, it is kind of org like, but it doesn't have like there's no characteristic of the creature that we're looking at here for my mind to latch onto. Like nothing is distinctive
Yeah,
enough to for it to be memorable for me.
I agree. I think the not the caring about sorceries almost as part of that of like how why does this care about sorceries? Why
Yeah,
would this creature be invested in the number of sorceries I have? It almost maybe it did originally care about artifacts or something. You know what I mean? Like I feel like if you knew this card cared about sorceries, you would add some kind of magical something.
yeah. But like what is Magnivore? Like it's eating
Magma, which is
yeah.
slow and happens at source, but there's no magma in here
Yeah,
either.
this is what I mean. It's just like the art is just divorced from not just everything about the card, but just everything. Like it
Yeah.
this could be on any creature and it would be equally unappealing on all of them.
Before you go on, I have 3 more. This is not relevant, but I have 3 more Carl Critchlow arts I think you might like.
3 more? How
3
long did
more.
you
Original
spend
Sakura.
trying to
I've
nail
gone
me
through
to
the
the wall
whole
on this?
his entire thing while you were talking. Sakura Tribe Elder, the OG one.
Okay.
Or are you kind of meh on that?
I'm sort of
I'm
meh
kind of meh on it,
on the
actually.
Elder.
Okay. What about 8th edition Underworld Dreams?
I'm gonna have to look that up. Okay, that's a good one.
And then Wildfire, the Urza Saga one. Actually, I don't think this is your style either. It meets most of your critiques.
No, I kind of like Wildfire.
It's kind of got a like 19th century Fall of the Dinosaurs feel, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. But
Like we don't know what killed the dinosaurs or what they looked like. It's really like
yeah,
fits that mode.
yeah. I think maybe where just based on this limited selection of like 5 Carl Critchlow cards we've been talking about, maybe what I like about his pieces of art that I actually like is the atmosphere. Like I think he can
Yeah.
create some real atmospheric pieces. But when it's something just abstract like Magnivore, where it's just a creature on a meaningless textureless background with no real connection to the card and like no atmosphere to create, then there's just nothing to like.
I think it is the lack of context and setting that really lets this down.
Yeah.
It means that we don't understand why it cares about sorceries, and I think it also cuts into the horror of what is sort of objectively a pretty gross, scary creature. But because again, we have no sense of scale, it doesn't feel like it's threatening us. Like I think if you added a figure here, just something to kind of orient around, this would be a more scary thing
Yeah.
and more effective.
Yeah. Okay. He's got some good stuff. I won't belabor this any longer, but it's worth looking up. Just Carl Critchlow art.
We do have some real like powerhouse old school magic artists in this episode, incidentally, like Carl Critchlow, Anthony S. Waters, Pete Venters. Like these are some powerhouses.
Yeah. One of my big regrets that's just developing as we go through this episode is not having an original Ice Age Lhurgoyf for Pete Venters to have signed when we met him at the Ravnica.
I think I have one that's signed. I think we had one that he signed.
That's incredible.
Somewhere in my box. I'll go dig it out. Okay, so I already spoiled my D. I don't feel like going. It's not an F because it's doing something I kind of find interesting, and I do really want to play that Ponza deck. If I hadn't stumbled across that Ponza deck, Connor, this would be an F. So D is as high as I'll go.
Yeah, it was an F for me before you explained that deck to me. So now I've upgraded it to a
the
D.
Land destruction.
Yeah, D for destruction.
I love it.
Okay, let's close out the Odyssey cycle with Terravore. This is the green one, of course. 1 GG for a star Lhurgoyf with trample, and Terravore's power and toughness are each equal to the number of land cards in all graveyards. I like Terravore. It's a little goofy looking and not very goyfy, but you know, I like its energy. I don't have much more to say about Terravore. Maybe I'm just tired of this cycle, but it works for me. I feel like a 3-mana trampler that cares about a card type being in graveyards that green can actually facilitate. Feels like a pretty solid card for me, both design wise and power wise.
Yeah, I think on a like pure functional level, I like this card quite a bit. It's a little bit boring, but it's very practical. Like trample, as you said, I think is big game. It feels really relevant that the bigger like it works inherently with a thing that wants to get arbitrarily large, right? It means you can't just chump block this. It's going to beat through eventually. I gotta say, of all of the Vores, this might be the least goyfy to me. Like again, even more. I don't know. Actually, Cognivore is pretty similar. But if this did not have a Lhurgoyf creature type, I don't think anyone would have said, "Oh yeah, that's a Lhurgoyf descendant."
No. What would this be? Just looking at it, in using your we weren't playing in Odyssey, but using your onslaught mind from back in the day, just looking at Terravore,
I think we both know it's a beast.
It is a beast.
It's a beast. Yeah, everything in Onslaught looks like all the beasts in
Everything
Onslaught
was
look
just
like
a
this,
beast
right?
back
These
then.
yeah, these well, and they had kind of this look of this non-specific horned knobbiness, right? Like you can't identify it as any one thing, but it's got a lot of horns and knobs.
Yep, beast.
It could be elemental too, actually. It looks pretty elementally. It looks to be made of the raw earth.
Yeah, you're right. And it eats it too.
But yeah, it just doesn't seem like a goyf. What is a goyf? What would a Goyf that consumes? I think part of the problem is we have Goyfs here that are consuming things that aren't dead bodies. But what would a Goyf in the heritage of Lhurgoyf look like that eats land? I don't know. We probably can't answer that.
I mean, it would probably be eating some. I mean, maybe I guess none of these except maybe Cognivore are like eating anything in the art, but Terravore is just kind of like hanging out on the
Yeah.
land. Maybe Terravore did eat through
He
this crevice that it's
Oh.
straddling, but that's
Oh, I like
I don't know.
that.
You really have to like think about it to get there.
That's pretty good. The scale problem we were talking about earlier, or not problem, but question. My
Mm.
basic read on the scale is that this guy's like 25 feet tall at least, maybe 70 feet tall.
He sort of has like D&D Tarrasque
He's very
energy
Tarrasque.
where it could just be like, infinitely large.
But that works, right? That's what the Tarrasque does. He consumes all, right?
Yeah,
And
it
gets bigger
does.
as he does, which is basically what Terravore does. Huh.
So Terravore is just basically Tarrasque.
I think it is literally Tarrasque. One thing that I did not expect about Terravore is this has appeared in hundreds and hundreds of competitive decks on MTG Top 8, like 300 lists. About 100 odd of those are pre-modern lists in either Oath decks as kind of a finisher or, which makes sense, right? Oath fills we didn't really mention this when we talked about Cognivore, but Oath fills the yard, which solves one of the questions these cards pose. Like Oath does everything you want. It's filling the yard and it's casting the creature for you. So this is seen play in a decent number of Oath lists, and then also just in dedicated like Terravore kind of Ponza lists, which again, that's pretty cool. And in 2011 era Legacy, it saw a lot of play in like Green Sun Zenith decks as like a toolbox one of.
I guess I didn't expect that, but it does sort of make sense with what we were talking about at the beginning with Terravore, that it's just sort of can just kind of be a role player and go along with things that Green is already kind of doing.
We like to look at Gatherer comments sometimes on the show. Gatherer, Wizards, crappy Scryfall that used to have a fun discussion section until they shut it down. There are a lot of Gatherer comments about combining this with Wood Elemental, which is a pretty funny meme. And someone else suggested, in a casual sense, combining this with Fluctuator, which reduces cycling cost by 2, and like the 2-cost cycling lands. And that is janky, but it does sound very fun.
Fluctuator.
So if you have the 2-cost cycling lands, you just kind of whiz through your entire deck. Yeah, so that seems like a fun set of interactions.
That is fun.
That's classic Magic, right? Like simple cards, complex, emergent gameplay. Very Richard Garfield.
Terravore.
All right. Rating wise, I am a B on Terravore, even though it's not Goyfy, even though it's a little bit boring. I just, of all of these, this is the one I most can imagine. Like, I should be putting this in some decks or throwing this in a cube. This is a fun card.
Yeah. I have it at a C. I do actually like this art, but I feel like it's just so far from being a Lhurgoyf that it's hard for me to go much higher than that. I was also my very first thought looking at Terravore was this would be a really cool Gruul Goyf if you had a red green Goyf where you're getting the land cards in your own graveyard from the green side. You're maybe getting lands in your opponent's graveyard from red land destruction, and then you have this Gruul Goyf that is benefiting from both of those.
Yeah.
So I just sort of maybe I just can't get away from this idea that Terravore could have been something greater. And actually, there are no gold Goyfs.
That's interesting.
Which feels like either intentional or a bit of a tragedy.
I think it's worth noting this is the most expensive of any of the Odyssey Goyfs, at around $5 for the Odyssey version non-foil, and like $40 foil.
Wow.
And I think that's all MH3. A lot of that is like MH3 Goyf hype, but that's up from like $3. It was consistently around $3 before then. So I think this just has like a long, and actually if you go back to 2013, it was like $10, I assume because of legacy play. So this is like the only one that people actually seem to want.
Huh.
And the foil price briefly spiked to hundreds of dollars in the wake of MH3, which is pretty funny. Oh no, that's fake. Spiked to like $50 though, which is,
okay.
Kind of cool.
I was going to say, I wonder how many actually sold for hundreds of dollars.
That's probably just people fake playing, trying to play the market.
Yeah.
Although there are only 2 Terravore foil Odyssey printings on TCG Player, one at 150, moderately played, and a very ambitious, heavily played one at $1,400.
I think our listeners better get on this because that's not gonna be available for very long.
Oh, I think I better buy the 150 one right now because I can clearly flip it. 10x, I can 10x, Connor. Terravore is going to the moon.
All right, we got to cover this on our MTG Finance cast.
I do wish we thought of this topic like 2 months ago before MH3 spoiled my genuine desire to just own a bunch of bad Goyfs in foil.
Yeah.
You can get a Dominaria remastered one in foil, but like, who cares? That's not the same. Although I do think reprinting this at Uncommon and Dominaria Remastered was clever. That this feels like a pretty good modern Uncommon.
Yeah.
Do we already rate this? I got so distracted thinking about pricing.
Yeah, I think we did.
All right, great.
You had a B, I had a C.
Boom. All right, let's jump forward again in time to Planar Chaos. So we had what, a like 4-year gulf gap, 5-year gap between Lhurgoyf and the Vores.
Goyf Gulf.
Das Goyf Gulf.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got about another 5-year gap between the Vores and Detritivore here in Planar Chaos. So buckle up. This one's a little more complicated. I asked for complexity, Connor, and WotC gave it to me with Detritivore.
Oh, they sure did.
Yeah, Detritivore, 2 RR for a creature Lhurgoyf, star. Detritivore's power and toughness are each equal to the number of non-basic land cards in your opponent's graveyards. Suspend X, and then the cost of the suspend, I gotta restart that part. Suspend X, X3R, X can't be 0. Whenever a time counter is removed from Detritivore, while it's removed from the game, destroy target non-basic land card.
Oh,
okay. So it's a 4-mana Goyfy thing that cares about non-basic lands in your opponent's yard, and then for 4+X, you can basically Molten Rain once a turn. Okay. I have complex feelings about this card. I think in a sort of objective sense, there's a lot of things wrong with it. It's pretty clumsy and hard to explain. It counts only your opponent's graveyard. It's the only Goyf to do that. It's actually the only Goyf to not count both graveyards, which is weird and inelegant. I don't like that it carried this Vor naming convention forward from Odyssey block. Wizards should own that this is a Goyf. It should be Detritivore or something. The art is extremely meh. There's a lot I don't like about it. Honestly, though, weird uninteractable land destruction that happens every turn is almost just like a completely unexplored design space for obvious reasons. And I kind of love that. I love the idea that every upkeep you're destroying an opponent's land as long as they have non-basics.
But I think that last clause that you've just said is why I don't like Detritivore mechanically. Like it's a very interesting and strange card, but I think that's why I don't really like it. Like it's completely 100% dependent on your opponent actually having things to target.
Yeah.
And not just that, but having enough things to target to kind of be worth your mana. Like if they just have one non-basic land in play that you're trying to get rid of, this is a pretty inefficient way to do that, right? Like you're paying 5 mana and waiting a turn to remove one land and get a 1/1, assuming they don't already have another non-basic land in their graveyard. Like that's not the best way to be doing things.
Connor, it's terrible, but it's just, I like it. It's just so jank. It's so Planar Chaos, or it's so Time Spiral block, right? It's like overly complicated. It's got suspend on it. It's like, it just makes me happy. You can hear it in my voice. I don't know why.
It does make you happy. And
I just bought a foil one this morning.
Oh, I'm glad you did. I think I might have a non-foil one kicking around in my like junk rare binder. I'm gonna have to
Connor, you might need to upgrade it because it has doubled in price since MH3 was announced, from 45 cents to 95 cents.
Oh boy. Yep. I think I need to get 10x Detritivore.
Well, there is 0 in stock on Card Kingdom today. Literally 0. Like,
oh wow.
The market is on fire.
So I need to go out and just buy Planar Chaos packs and hope to pull the Detritivore.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, or just I think you should go drive around the entire LA metro area at every card game shop and see if they have any Detritivores in their bulk.
All right. Yeah, we're gonna have to wrap this up pretty quick so I can get.
You better get on the road.
Yeah, I don't know. This is 5, and then I'm trying to think if they have more. You know, if they have multiple non-basics that you're trying to get rid of, then we're looking at 6+ mana and like an even longer. I mean, not that you care about the 2/2 that you're getting for 6 mana, but like an even longer delay to get that out.
Well, but what if your opponent is helping you, right? They've got fetch land, so they're filling their own graveyard. You've got wasteland, maybe you're strip mining them.
But then, I mean, you're still just kind of in worse Terravore territory, right?
Yeah, I think that's the actual problem, is like, well, you might as well just play a better
Yeah,
Like
just
play
play
play Bolt
a
Drift.
better just play a better creature. Like don't play like a 4-mana creature that maybe eventually becomes a 5/5 if you're like after your opponent cracks enough fetches and then you get a 5/5 with no evasion and no protection.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I can't see the scenario where you're really happy playing Detritivore unless you have like no other way to get rid of non-basics because of whatever format you're playing.
Well, Connor, what if I told you that Guillaume Wafotapa got a first place at Pro Tour Yokohama in this in Block Constructed, and that one Louis Scott Vargas won GP San Francisco in Block Constructed with this card?
Do you think we could get LSV on the show to talk about Detritivore?
Would that change? Would that change your rating if we now introduce LSV's been waiting for the last hour and a half of us talking about other Vores for his moment?
I'd consider slightly upgrading my rating.
Just as an aside, because it's fun, I'll link to the MTG top 8. But it looks like this mostly saw play in like Teaching's control decks as a mirror breaker, where I can kind of see it. Like if you're really playing a super slow, grindy control game, and on turn 9 you're like uncounterable because it's suspend. I'm going to destroy 4 of your lands. You know that's kind of some game.
Yeah, maybe Detritivore is like the ultimate sideboard card where you're never going to want Detritivore in the first instance, but maybe sometimes you want this spiky cat demon thing to deal with a very specific scenario that your opponent is setting up.
Although even there, it's a weird like sideboard tech because it's not Leyline of the Void, right? It's not like it dumpsters your opponent. It's like
it does.
Oh man, that's fairly annoying.
Yeah, the thing that it does so inefficiently. And I think the fact that you only get the value from Detritivore by suspending it is the deal breaker for me, because like if you play the cheapest way you can use this as land destruction is by paying 5 mana to suspend it. And maybe there's some rules nuance I'm overlooking, but I don't think there's even a way to reduce that cost the way there might be if Detritivore were a sorcery, or just playing it as a creature with like an ETB or something. So you're paying 5 mana and then you're doing nothing on that turn. Detritivore just gets suspended and then you just wait for your next upkeep.
I think in that one scenario where it matters, you're never playing it on 5. You're playing it on like we are locked in a like counterspell war that no one can win. Or we are playing like draw land, go, right? That's all we're doing together because we're both waiting for someone to make the first move in the counterspell war. And then I'm like, great, I'm going to put 9 mana into an uncounterable spell that will destroy 5 of your lands. Go.
Yeah.
I don't care about any of the other text on this card. I just care that I'm destroying 5 of your lands and you can't interact with that at all.
Yeah. I think that's right. And I think that leads to the rating that I would give to Detritivore.
Okay, before you rate it, I want to hear about the art.
I have never liked this art at all. This is a Paolo Parente piece, and I like a good amount of his work.
I don't like Paolo Parente's work, unfortunately.
Yeah, you don't like his work at all. But I don't like this one. I don't like it's this weird, like over-muscled figure that Detritivore has, which feels like it's kind of a lingering artifact from the kind of Onslaught days.
Yeah, it's very like Image Comics or something.
Yes. I definitely don't like these railroad spikes that he's got going on all over the place. I don't like the like goofy, almost anime hair spike coming out of the top of Detritivore's head.
Very humanoid face.
I feel like it has a very feline face in a way that I find distressing for some reason.
What is Goyfy about this guy? Like at all?
Nothing. Other than equal to the number of X cards in Y graveyard. But even that, this is the first and I think only Goyf, right, that only counts your opponent's graveyard. So even that is like it's kind of mechanically and thematically confusing for it to be a Lhurgoyf.
Yeah. Another thing that's weird about this is like Planar Chaos is, I guess this isn't one of the plane shifted cards or color shifted, but a lot of Planar Chaos is like playing with the color pie in alternate realities, and like this doesn't do any of that.
Yeah. And artistically, I don't think it's not interesting in the way that a lot of other time spiral cards that have suspend or that are kind of like playing with the idea of time are. Like Detritivore is just kind of stepping out of this amorphous blue, like just blueness
into an equally featureless
into nothing
wasteland. Yeah.
You
know what they should have done? If Wizards was truly bold, they should have just color shifted Cognivore into red. Changed nothing else. It's just 6RR Cognivore. That would have been great.
I would have loved that card.
You ready to rate? Oh, wait, real quick. Just a little bit of natural history trivia. I did not know. Detritivore is a real word. It means any, quote, quoting Wikipedia, any heterotroph that consumes detritus, unquote, which apparently is earthworms, fungi, slugs, sea cucumbers, and many other organisms.
Oh. And Austin, what is a heterotroph?
A heterotroph is something that can't make its own food.
Oh,
boom! I was ready. You're not gonna.
That was gonna be my gotcha.
You're not gonna Carl Critchlow me, Connor.
That was gonna be my move.
Okay, I'm gonna go first with my rating here because it makes no sense. I have an A on this, even though I don't like the art and I think it's inelegant. I just think the idea of repeatable land destruction that's uninteractable is objectively bad and funny. So A.
Okay. I have it at a D. I'm not going to budge on that until LSV comes on here and tells me why I'm wrong. All right, Austin, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm just a little bit nervous about our next Goyf because we have made it to Tarmogoyf. Just one set later, we've gone Planar Chaos to Future Sight, and now we're at probably, I would say, the most famous, or at least most familiar Goyf for most of our listeners, Tarmogoyf. This is 1G 100%. For a star power, 1+ star toughness. It never gets easier to say, does it?
No.
Tarmogoyf's power is equal to the number of card types among cards in all graveyards, and its toughness is equal to that number +1. And then I have to read this little reminder text here because it's interesting, has some historical value. It says, the card types are artifact, creature, enchantment, instant, land, planeswalker, sorcery, and tribal. Now, this original printing of Tarmogoyf in Future Sight is the very first mention of planeswalkers as a creature type. Planeswalkers didn't actually show up as printed cards until the next block after this, Lorwyn.
And tribal.
So we have two types mentioned on Tarmogoyf here that just did not exist at this point in the game, which was some very, very cool foreshadowing and perfect for a set like Future Sight. Honestly, I think enough has kind of been said about Tarmogoyf by people who know a lot more about kind of the competitive history of Tarmogoyf than I do. Obviously, this was a not just a staple, but a complete house in Modern, probably, a decade ago or more?
Yeah, format-defining card for half a decade at least.
Absolutely. It has definitely fallen off the Modern radar since then, is my understanding. But I'm not going to try to get too deep into a subject that I know very little about, which is Modern. So I'm just going to evaluate this purely as a Goyf among fellow Goyfs. Compared to its fellow Goyfs, Tarmogoyf is absolutely cracked. This is the cheapest Goyf to date by a wide margin compared to most of the cards we've seen so far today. Tarmogoyf is just 2 mana and very, very quickly can become a 3/4, a 4/5, a 5/6 for very little mana and very little work compared to the other Goyfs. I think that's really very interesting compared to especially the Odyssey cycle. Like Tarmogoyf he doesn't make you work for it.
No, he just shows up and squishes people, especially back in the day, as you're saying. And today, for that matter, again, we are not a competitive podcast. And I'm looking at MTG top 8. In the last week, Tarmogoyf has appeared in ballpark, looks like 15 vintage and modern MTGO challenges in the top 16. Tarmogoyf is still putting up numbers.
That's real.
Jund deck with Tarmogoyf in it won the modern challenge 1 week ago from today. So, still a card in 2024, which is wonderful. One of the things I love about Tarmogoyf is that it's only this good because of an accident, 2 accidents. Kind of like Skullclamp is another iconic case of accidental power creep. Goyf was originally supposed to be just star because Mark Rosewater felt like the star/star plus or 1+ star. God, it's hard to say.
It's very hard to say.
It's very hard to say. And he felt like that was clumsy. And if you look, actually, between the original Lhurgoyf and Tarmogoyf, everything is star, right? All of the Odyssey Goyfs are star, and Detritivore is star. And then we have the mysterious return of star/1+ star here, which was an accident, a miscommunication in development. And an even more important miscommunication, this was meant to be printed at 2 and a G, 3 mana Goyf, which I think would have still been a playable card even in Modern back then, but would not have been a format defining card, which is sort of wonderful. It's wonderful that it was format defining, but not broken like Skull Clamp, right? Like this is accidentally too good, but not so good that it broke the game, which is a real
Yeah.
difficult space to fit in.
Like at the end of the day, Tarmogoyf's still a creature. I mean, a very dangerous and powerful one, but it doesn't have the game breaking potential of Skull Clamp.
Yeah, still a vanilla creature, which I think is one of the things that makes Tarmogoyf really fun. Like I run Tarmogoyf in my cube. My cube is low enough power that it's arguably a little good for my cube. But at the end of the day, it is just a vanilla creature, which I think is a fun design space. There's not a, I mean, is there any other like basically vanilla creature in Magic that's this important? Savannah Lions, maybe? It's got to be a short list.
Maybe Org.
Sure. Orc, Visordrix, obviously another format defining card. I guess Wild Nacatl, depending on how generous you want to be. It's again just a big beater. It doesn't have any other keywords.
I'm sorry, Trained Org is the vanilla
Trained Org, that's right. Original Org, I don't remember what Original Org does.
Quite a bit, but we don't have to get into that here.
We'll do an org special sometime. All 3 orgs we'll cover in detail.
What do you think of the art on original Tarmogoyf? It's gotten a few different variations over the years, but what do you think of this original one by Justin Murray?
One, I think we should do a quick, which is the best Tarmogoyf art, because there's only 4. We could do a whole episode someday too. But short version, I like it. I like it a lot. I think it's, we talked about some of these other Goyfs that they kind of are too explicit. They're not horrifying enough. And I think it's very stylistically different than the Pete Venter's original Lhurgoyf, but it's the most horrifying we've seen since then. I think because it's so sketchy and undefined, is that viscera dripping from its mouth? Is that just its mouth? What is it holding? It's a person, but you can barely tell. You know what it actually reminds me of, Connor?
What?
It is very like Francisco Goya's Saturn devouring his son.
Oh, wow. It really is.
Isn't it? The deep blacks and the kind of inhuman, barely human anatomy and the mysterious viscera. Yeah.
And the victim kind of has a Goya-esque facial expression.
He has a very Goya-esque facial expression. There's a lot of horror to me in this art.
Yeah. It's just all kind of motion. There's just these suggestions of limbs and teeth and violence and viscera. It's really interesting. I think the most discernible detail in this piece of art is probably the victim. That facial expression and I guess recognizable humanoid limbs are the only things that really register as recognizable, at least for me.
Yeah, it's where does its mouth end? There's this kind of deep darkness in the center of the frame that I think might be the bottom of its mouth, but it might be that it has giant bug mandibles. It's hard to tell. When they reprinted this in Time Spiral Remastered, they kind of punched up the contrast a lot and brightened it. And it is way, way worse for it. It a lot of the horror. It just goes to show that all of this aggressive color grading they've started doing. Here, I'm setting you this up.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Right? It's just a lot less scary because you can tell what's going on. But this Future Sight one, where you can't see anything, is very effective.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't like this remastered one nearly as much.
No, it's just oh, right, I see everything, and therefore I'm not scared anymore.
Yeah, it's kind of been sterilized.
Yeah, sterilized is a good word for it.
There are a few... I think 2. I'm not going to count this new Fallout.
Yeah, 2 plus the Fallout one that we don't want to talk about.
Yeah, let's say there's 2 other pieces of art for Tarmogoyf.
So yeah, there's the Ryan Barger from Modern Masters, which I like. I think it's pretty good. I like the way it's erupting. It's very paintered. There's a hell of a lot of skill going on in the art. I don't think it's as scary, but I think it's a really cool piece.
I like this one quite a lot. It reminds me of Shadow of the Colossus a little bit.
Yeah.
The old, again, not that old, but, it's
pretty old.
A time period of interest to you and I, Shadow of the Colossus.
Mm-hmm.
It has this sort of explosive energy to it where you can feel this Tarmogoyf bursting out of the earth and going for these 2 deer, I guess.
Yeah, I also like its multiple maws. It has a sort of elemental hunger to it.
Yeah.
That I really enjoy. It's clearly unnatural. I like that. I like how this is a creature of pure horror. It's the opposite of one of our beasts with Terravore, right? Is it looks too calm and basic. And this thing is clearly this should never have been created, or at least never awakened.
Yeah.
Now we get to the Philip Berberin one from Ultimate Masters. I gotta say, not a huge fan of that one. I find that one almost comedic looking.
I think it's very goofy looking.
Yeah, it's like boo. It's like he's trying to scare the deer. He doesn't. I don't quite buy it as horror.
Yeah, it's a little bit like it's a little toothy for like a children's book, but something about the proportions and the way the teeth kind of like
Mm,
bulge out of the mouth and the like giant horns and big sort of goofy looking hands, like it has this
color maybe too.
yeah, this really like bright sort of like sickly ochre color to it. Like it looks a little goofy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I know we said we wouldn't do the Fallout one, Scrounging Deathclaw. I'm going to briefly do it. I don't like these cards. I don't like this frame. I don't like this Fallout thing in my Magic. Ignore all that old man whining. I also think it's a pretty lousy piece of art. It is so high contrasty. It looks like it's like a collage. Like it's just not good.
When you texted me an image of this card like a week or two ago, I think, and my very first gut reaction, which I told you, was that this looks like a playtest card for a failed Kickstarter board game.
Yes, and I still think that's the perfect encapsulation of that art.
Yeah, it's just rough. The frame and font, no part of this card is doing any other part any favor.
Well, they're not helping, but I think if you stripped all that away, I think it would be worse. Like I think it's just not a great piece of art, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, let's not end on that
No,
note. We
let's
gotta
not.
have something.
Let's go back to
positive
Tarmogoyf and how great he is. I was very pleased to see that Tarmogoyf still appears in 12,000 cubes on Cube Cobra. And if you look at the cube map, I'll put a link. I encourage people to go look up Tarmogoyf on the Lucky Paper cube map. He has this wonderful map where basically he occupies like the entire map in a sort of scattered way. There's no part where Tarmogoyf dominates. He's just sort of suffusing the whole thing, which I think is very appropriate for Tarmogoyf as the sort of staple card that fits into almost every format. There's one big exception, and I think that's just great. It's such an iconic card, and I like that it's still seeing play 17 years of power creep later.
That's the positive ending note we needed.
What's your rating on Tarmogoyf, Connor?
I mean, if it's not clear already, I think it's obvious. It's got to be an S.
Here, S tier for Tarmogoyf, accept nothing less.
S tier, yes tier. If you think this show is S tier, or maybe even if you think it's A tier, it would be wonderful if you leave a like on the video if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. Share with a friend who plays Magic or who just wants to hear about old pieces of cardboard with monsters on them. We would really appreciate it. It helps us out a lot.
I agree. And I think, Connor, this podcast is the Tarmogoyf of talking about Kamigawa cards at a minimum.
To put that in the pitch to your friends.
Okay. All right. That's Tarmogoyf. We are going to jump forward again in time, a huge jump in time. We're going to go another 12 years before we see another Goyf. And arguably, this one is not exactly a real Goyf. This next card is Chimney Goyf, which is from Mystery Box 1. This is one of those Mystery Box 1 kind of playtest cards, so it's not legal in any format. It doesn't look like a real card. It has a very whimsical line art drawing by some member of R&D. Enough with the preamble. Let's read Chimney Goyf. Chimney Goyf is 4 and a B for a star/star+1 creature Lhurgoyf imp. Flying. Chimney Goyf's power is equal to the number of card types among cards in all graveyards, and its toughness is equal to that number +1. And when Chimney Goyf dies, target opponent puts a card from their hand on top of their library. All right, so we're breaking a bit of a rule here. We normally don't talk about kind of uncards, like cards that aren't legal in any format. We're breaking that rule here because I like the test cards, and frankly, I don't like the uncards. So, it's our show, so I don't have to talk about silver-bordered cards, but I do like this thing. If you're not familiar with the joke here, this is a wonderful stapling together of two cards. One half, obviously, is Tarmogoyf. The other half is a card called Chimney Imp. So Chimney Imp is a iconically terrible card from, I want to say, yes, Mirrodin. So Mirrodin Chimney Imp is 4 and a B for an imp, 1/2 flying. When it dies, target opponent puts a card from their hand on top of their library. So this is just literally Chimney Imp and Tarmogoyf put together. What I like about that is back in the early 2000s, if you were on the Wizards of the Coast forums or anywhere online talking about Magic, Chimney Imp was the butt of every joke. It was like the worst card. It was the byword for terrible cards because even back then, a 5-mana 1/2 flyer didn't cut the mustard. What I think is kind of wonderful about this card is it actually somehow works and like redeems Chimney Imp, because I think like in a limited context, like a 5-mana Tarmogoyf flying body with a little bit of upside on death is basically fair, like a fair uncommon. And I think that's just sort of magical. And whoever in R&D came up with that observation, I think deserves a tremendous kudos.
Nailing this is an uncommon, I think, is perfect. Like this, I could see myself like actually picking this up in a draft as, I don't know, the 5th or 6th pick or something. But this could be a real card.
Yeah, it could.
And it's so cute.
Yeah, it could totally. Yeah, and the art is hilarious and adorable. Like again, it's this cute little winged Goyf hanging out behind a chimney, looking a little. He doesn't really look sinister. He looks kind of shy to me. He's got kind of a shy feel.
Yeah, shy, but still happy. There's a grin there.
Yeah, he's got a big grin, big toothy grin. Yeah.
Maybe this is the definitive Lhurgoyf appearance that we've been looking for. This is what a Lhurgoyf looks like.
I mean, not the wings, but I think the mouth, it is kind of a cartoonish encapsulation of the mouth. Let's look at the subsequent ones. What kind of mouth do they have?
They tend to have more mouths.
More mouths, yeah. They seem to have settled on a multiplicity of mouths as being an important thing. This guy's got just one big toothy grin.
Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot more to say about Chimney Goyf, except that I find it very charming, and for me, it is an easy A.
Yeah, I give this non-Goyf an A as well.
Hey, it's a Goyf. It's a Lhurgoyf, Connor.
Yeah. Oh, okay. This non-playable Goyf.
All right.
Okay. Let's move to an actually playable legal Goyf. This is a Necrogoyf. 3 BB for a star 4 Lhurgoyf. Necrogoyf's power is equal to the number of creature cards in all graveyards, so only the power is changing here. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player discards a card. And then it has Madness for 1 BB, and as a reminder, Madness is if you discard this card, discard it into exile. When you do, cast it for its Madness cost or put it into your graveyard. So Necrogoyf is always going to have 4 toughness unless you change that some other way, but its power will scale with the number of creatures in all graveyards. Honestly, I wish I had more feelings about this card than I do. For me, it's just kind of fine. It's sort of interesting that it can grow itself with its discard ability, which is something that we have not really seen with the other Lhurgoyfs other than my least favorite Detritivore. I mean, that's kind of cool, but I think there's just something about like a 5-mana star 4. It's going to have some power when you play it on 5. It'll have a little less power maybe if you madness it out. This is a Modern Horizons 2 card, so I'm sure the idea is to do something insane with your graveyard and have it super full and play this as a 24 on turn 3 or whatever, but I don't know, I'm just not really feeling it.
Yeah, I have a sort of similar feeling about this. I feel like he's trying a bit too hard. Like, this is one of these modern cards where I feel like I can see all of the knobs that they're twisting in development, like on the card. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Should this be a star 4 or a star 3? Should this be a star or a star 1+ star? Like, I feel like you see that somehow in this card mechanically, because it has like 3 things that, I mean, they sort of complement each other and go together, but they just don't, to me, hum together in an elegant way. I think it's really the madness here that makes this look awkward. Like, I think if you just had the first 2 abilities, it would feel more like, it would be a less powerful card and perhaps even a less interesting card. But I think it would be a more elegant card. It would feel less like, oh, okay, we got to put something else on this thing to make it playable.
That's a really good point. Like the madness is just kind of, yeah, here's another discard related thing. We need to crank up the power knob just a little bit more here, but we don't want to tinker with this 4 toughness or the mana cost. So let's do madness.
Yeah, it's we can ring. I actually should get a sound effect for this, but we've reached the part of the podcast where I say something uncharitable about EDH. But this is a very EDH card, right? It does a bunch of stuff.
It took a long time for us to get there this time.
It's sort of set up so that you're rarely going to have nothing to do with it. Like, it's just too overtuned for me. It doesn't spark joy. One thing I do like about it is that each player discarding once a turn, I like that plays as a disadvantage or an advantage for your opponents, depending on their deck. So I like that little bit of pressure and uncertainty. You are occasionally going to get blown out by this thing when your opponent, it turns out, wants to madness something out or wants to discard cards. So I think that's cute and interesting.
In the Necrogoyf mirror?
Yeah, in the Necrogoyf mirror, that's going to lead to some super interesting interactions. This also shows up in a lot of parts of the cube map, a bit like Tarmogoyf himself, actually, scattered into cubes, including even old border cubes, because this saw an old border printing. I think, honestly, if you're putting this in an old border cube, I would argue you're cheating. This does not feel like an old border magic card to me, spiritually, even if it has an old border put on it.
Yeah, definitely not.
This is, I believe, the most played card we're going to talk about today in EDH at 22,000 decks, which is a very healthy number.
Oh, wow. I mean, it makes sense in EDH, where I think there's going to be a lot more complaining in the very near future of this episode about EDH. But, you know, you could see like almost said Necrogoyf.
My favorite bands.
Yeah, it's a Fallout Boy cover band. So Necrogoyf, you know, it's obviously scales very nicely in an EDH game. You're counting every graveyard, so 4 of them instead of 2 of them. That's nice. That definitely doesn't make me like it more.
Where are you at with the art on this card, Connor?
It's just, I don't know. It also feels overtuned to me. I'm not sure why. Like, it has a little bit of that same quality of the original Tarmogoyf, where there's like a lot of sense of motion and sort of energy. Like, it looks like this Necrogoyf is, at least to me, it looks like it's about to spring or is springing to like pounce on its prey or something. But it just feels really abstracted. Like, you don't see what the Necrogoyf is hunting or eating. There's no real like sense of terror or viciousness to it. It's just kind of there.
Yeah, it could almost just be like a inanimate object.
Yeah.
Because there isn't a sense of motion or hunt or threat in here. We're kind of saying that we don't like about this the things we do like about Tarmogoyf, because I don't like how sort of abstracted it is. I don't like how sort of unclear it is what's going on and what part of this is what part of the creature. And I think a little bit of that is the things you pointed out, and a little bit of that is, like Walt Whitman, we are large and we contain multitudes. Yep.
I don't know what to add to that.
kind of like Necrogoyf himself.
Yeah.
My rating on this, Connor, is a B. It is just, but it's sort of a joyless B. It's just I can't put you lower than a B because you're a fine card, but you're not my favorite student. You're not getting invited around after class to play cube with me.
Yeah, I feel like that's a C. An unenthusiastic B.
But it's trying so hard, Connor.
That's not gonna get you there in my class.
All right, B and C. All right, let's go to another Modern Horizons 2 card, Altar of the Goyf. Altar of the Goyf is 5 for a tribal artifact, Lhurgoyf. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of card types among cards in all graveyards. And Lhurgoyf creatures you control have trample. And then the flavor text here, what dies grows the illegible. Clawed out statue inscription. Okay, this is cute, but I find this just too on the nose for me. It's kind of like one of those internet videos from the late 2000s where the whole joke is just that it's a reference to something. Like, this card is just like, did you notice that this card is a reference to Tarmogoyf?
I'm glad you explained that because I had no idea.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I should have gotten that out of the way. This card, Connor, is referencing Tarmogoyf.
Oh.
Yeah. And I think the worst offender here is the flavor text. So we didn't read the flavor text for the original Tarmogoyf because it was printed without flavor text. It just had reminder text. Starting in, I don't know, one of the Modern Master sets, it got the iconic flavor text. What is it? I'm just forgetting. What is the iconic flavor text? What doesn't grow dies.
It's not iconic.
And what dies... what doesn't grow dies, and what dies grows the Tarmogoyf. So this is obviously referencing that, but I think it's like so unsubtle, right? It's like, not only do we have to like use the exact same flavor text, but then we have like illegible, and then we have clawed out stone inscription, just statue inscription, just in case it wasn't completely clear what had happened to the inscription. Like, it places no trust in you as the player to figure out what's going on here. And I think the real core problem for me with this is there isn't actually a joke underneath all that. It is just literally make a creature kind of Tarmogoyf, but not really, because it doesn't give +X+1+X. It just gives +X+X. Like, it doesn't go far enough, but it goes too far for me to like it. I just don't like this card.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it either. I wish I like the art. I'll return to that later, but I don't know. I think I'm bothered. Okay, first of all, I'm just going to go through the text box and say what I'm bothered by. I have never liked effects that trigger based on one of your creatures attacking alone.
Why? I love Exalted.
I do not like Exalted in any way whatsoever. Well, we can have another show about this, but I don't like how Exalted applies to creatures that it is not printed on. That's another show.
What?
Do you know what I mean?
What? No, I don't know what you mean. Explain it now.
If you have a creature with Exalted, right?
Yes.
And then another creature you control attacks alone.
Yes.
Creature A's Exalted ability triggers.
That's the whole point.
I know.
Because you get a whole team of people who exalt their champion.
I know, and I hate that.
What about you? Must like Nephrox, Overlord of Grixis.
I'm going to have to look up Nephrox here.
Nephrox, Overlord of Grixis, as everyone knows, is a 39-cent, 6-mana, 5/5 flying exalted demon that whenever he attacks alone, defending player sacks a creature. Tell me that's not savage.
I mean, I guess that's okay. Okay, let me tell you why I don't like attacks alone.
All right. Okay.
It feels like anti-fun to me. Like maybe this is just how I want to play Magic, but the idea of having a bunch of creatures and then not attacking with them so that you can have the one creature swing out there and get some big Voltron effect, in this case +X, which is not exciting at all. That's just not interesting to me in any way.
So you're saying it's kind of like Sweep or something from Champions of Kamigawa, which for anyone who doesn't know, I can't blame you. Sweep is like return any number of a certain basic land type to your hand and then do that number of something. Like Sweep is just not fun. It's very unfun to pick up a bunch of your lands, even though it might be good. You're saying Exalted is like a lesser version of that problem.
Yeah. I think that's how it makes me feel.
Yeah, I kind of get that.
I'm not having the fun, especially with like Exalted. If I'm getting creatures, especially creatures out, and I'm building out this big board, and then my big play is to not attack with those creatures, that's not fun.
Well, while we're talking about Exalted in this card's context, and then I want you to go back to going through everything you don't like. If this is going to be called Altar of the Goyf, and it's just going to be a ridiculous joke card, can it be called Exalter of the Goyf instead?
Oh, that's so much better.
Isn't that terrible, but great?
That is.
Come on,
great.
It's right there.
Why can't it? Why doesn't it have Exalted?
Flavor text, huh?
Why can't it have Exalted? Do only creatures have Exalted?
Exalted is literally like whenever a creature you control attacks alone, that creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Like it's not right. Like it's not a like what is it called? Not keyword. What is the other one?
I know what you mean.
This is riveting content right here. It's not that thing where it just has a name.
It's the other one. Okay, I'd just like to clarify, even though it sounds like I didn't actually...
Word. It's not an ability word, it's a keyword.
There you go. I'd like to clarify, even though it sounds like I don't actually know what Exalted is, I basically do know what it is, and I still don't like it.
Okay. So first, you don't like Exalted, and you don't like it on this card.
Yeah. Okay, so that's point number one.
Yeah.
I really don't like this second line, which is Lhurgoyf creatures you control have trampled. It just feels like such a throwaway thing to slap on this card.
Yes, it's like there's no like internal coherence to this card. It's like a worse version of Necrogoyf we just talked. It's just like a bunch of stuff sitting on the same card.
Yep. And there's nothing connecting these two abilities, right? Like the first ability doesn't care if it's a Lhurgoyf or not. It's just a Lhurgoyf-ish-esque ability, you know?
Yeah.
It's just like this is sort of what Lhurgoyfs do.
Well, and like why is it tribal artifact Lhurgoyf for that matter? Like up to this point in Magic, there's nothing that cares about the Lhurgoyf creature type.
Right.
So like why
Including
is this
Lhurgoyfs.
tribal? Yeah, it doesn't hang together. But you said you do like the art. I don't mind the art here. I don't really have any feelings towards it either way.
What I like about the art is the little deer or elk hanging out around the altar of the Goyf, because in two of the three pieces of Tarmogoyf art that we saw, the two more recent ones, there are deer or elk being like about to be devoured by the Tarmogoyf.
Yeah, that is cute.
Yeah, I like that little call out. You know, here they're just they're just hanging out around this stone, this altar to their predator.
You said stone. I think the altar and the stairs are stone, but the Goyf is like a tree, I think. Like if you look, it's got roots and stuff. So that's cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
I like how green it is. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
like that it calls back to Tarmogoyf being a green card.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of running out of nice stuff to say though. I'm kind of feel myself veering back to negativity because the other thing about this card is I don't think we're the only people who are kind of meh on it. I couldn't find a single Reddit result on the EDH or MTG Cube subreddits for this card ever, which is rare, frankly, for any card with any chance of playability. Like the fact no one has ever talked about this in EDH context on Reddit, I think says a lot for how much it did not strike a chord.
Yeah, it's not really striking a chord with us.
Yeah, what's your rating, Connor?
I had it at a C, but that feels a little much. No, I'll stick with C. I like the art well enough that I'll give it a C.
I'll give it a D. I will say this card has one appearance on MTG Top 8 in a winning MTGO sealed MH2 block super qualifier limited event. So props to Kate Sale for that.
All right. Okay. Let's move on to the last of the Goyfs that is released as of this recording. A little foreshadowing there. This is Urborg Lhurgoyf, the most difficult Goyf to pronounce from Dominaria United. This is 1 and a G for a star, 1+ star Lhurgoyf, as it should be. Urborg Lhurgoyf has kicker cost of blue and or black. And as it enters the battlefield, you mill 3 cards for each time it was kicked. Urborg Lhurgoyf's power is equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard, and its toughness is equal to that number +1. So it's the original Lhurgoyf counting creatures in the graveyard, but costs 2, and has this wonderful Sultai, right? Sultai kicker cost thrown in. I really like Urborg Lhurgoyf. This was, I think, meant to be kind of the center of a Sultai, like blue, green, black self-mill deck in Dominaria that I think just never really came together and never really quite clicked in a way that could compete in standard, at least at that time. And I assume this is still the case now. I haven't played much recently, but I think Urborg Lhurgoyf is still not really getting there. But I really like this card. I like that it's self-enabling, and to me, a more interesting way than Necrogoyf. I like that you can just play this out as a cheaper Lhurgoyf, or if you have the mana for it, you can kick it and enable this card, turn some of the other cards in your deck on, and power those up a little bit. I like the options. I think Kicker is an elegant way to do that, and Necrogoyf's solution was inelegant and inflexible.
I agree. This has kind of by the way, I'm just going to call this Urborg Lhurgoyf now to get that out of the way
Okay.
before I do it by accident later. I like that Urborg here sort of builds on itself. I like that it goes from it can be a 2 mana play, it can be a 3 mana play, it can be a 4 mana play, so it can fit in a variety of points in your scale. It is more relevant late game, which is sort of awkward, honestly, with the fact that it costs 2 mana. But I like that it gives you some interesting decisions to play with there. And particularly in a cube context, like especially a lower powered cube, I like how this kicker plays out. I like that you could just put this in a green deck, but it rewards you or incentivizes you to maybe look for a couple more fetch lands or a dual land or some other kind of splash to make him just that little bit better. So I like the modality on this card. It's like modal, but not in a kind of it's not like a rankle kind of modal, right? Like this is never bad modal. It's more like you could turn this up a little bit as the game goes on.
To me, that's like often the most interesting kind of card, that a card that like, and the most attractive to me in cubing and drafting, like a card that gives you different options in a way that I guess kind of like tickles your brain, like makes you think about how you could make this more powerful. There's still scenarios where you can play it and use it without needing to use that kicker, but it at least can potentially reward you for kind of being clever and having an interesting deck building concept beyond just the 2 mana star 1+ star.
Yeah, and interesting kind of play decisions within the game, right? Because like going back to this modal idea, right? Like I think a lot of modal cards fall into the trap of just always being good. Like Charming Prince or something. Pretty much good anytime you play Charming Prince. This thing actually is the opposite, where it's forcing you to confront some tensions. Like, do I want to get this out on 2 to squeeze in another spell this turn? Or do I want to go for broke and kick this twice to really fill my yard? Like it's giving you uncomfortable choices rather than easy choices, which I think leads to more interesting gameplay.
Yeah. And I think as we've seen in Modern with the Sultai self-mill deck that never seems to come together no matter how much support it gets. Like it's not an overpowered ability.
No, it's definitely not an overpowered card. What about the art, Connor?
I like this one a lot. This to me has a little bit of the like energy and movement of Tarmogoyf, maybe not the original one, but the second printing, I guess, the one that's bursting out of the ground. It's a little hard to tell what's happening on the back, but it looks like there's some like skeletons.
They kind of look like they're commanding it. Are they like little forest spirits? Like, what are they? I
I'm
really
not
couldn't
sure.
figure it out.
They're sort of riding the Tarmogoyf, maybe, and yeah,
I don't know how I feel about Tarmogoyf being tamed.
Yeah.
Should a Goyf be able to be tamed and ridden? I feel like he should be throwing these into his maw.
Maybe they're not taming it. They're controlling it with Urborgness.
Or Borg.
Or Borgitude.
Or Borgitude. I do overall like this art. I like the strong kind of like light and dark elements. Like it's got a lot of contrast in it. It's like an HDR piece of magic art. I like all the pink. I think that's very fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's got like the basic color scheme here is pink and green, which is not something you see every day, especially on a green card. And it kind of feels like it's nodding at the sultiness of this in a subtle way in the art.
Also, this is the closest thing we've seen to a gold Goyf.
It is interesting, now you mention it, that there are no gold Goyfs because Lhurgoyf sits right on the border between green and black, arguably more into black mechanically, and yet they're basically like green is where they've settled, which I think is a real fun little color pie twist.
Yeah.
Although, as we're about to see, there's some pushback on that in MH3.
Yep, maybe settled until recently.
That's right.
Yeah, I think all that adds up to a very solid A for me for Urborg Lhurgoyf.
I agree. Easy A. This ain't in the like S tier of, I'll remember it on my deathbed, but it's still a cool card.
I'll probably have one next to me at my deathbed, but I may not be thinking about it.
Ugh. Okay, let's go to the newest Goyf, the one that's making all the press, making all the splash, Nethergoyf. Nethergoyf is, buckle up. Nethergoyf is a single B, black, for a creature Lhurgoyf, */1+*. Nethergoyf's power is equal to the number of card types among cards in your graveyard, and its toughness is equal to that number +1. Escape, 2B, exile any number of other cards from your graveyard with 4 or more card types among them. You may cast this card from your graveyard for its escape cost. Okay, so before we get into this and the rest of the MH3 and M3C cards in detail, I first need to get something out of the way. We don't really do new cards on this podcast. If you haven't noticed from our oeuvre, we're more like here to talk about Soratami and cards from antiquities. This is a magic history show, sort of not jokingly. So we're probably going to kind of whiz through these because we don't really have much scintillating insight on the competitive side. But I think we can talk about our kind of aesthetic reactions to these cards and where they fit into the overall history of Goyfs. So first, I kind of mourn Tarmogoyf when I see this card instinctively. It's almost Tarmogoyf at 1 mana. Admittedly, the your graveyard thing is like a very, very serious drawback, but it is still basically, it is a 1 mana Goyf with recurrence, and it's in an enemy color, which feels like adding salt to Tarmogoyf's wounds. I'm a little interested that this card has gotten comparatively little chatter on MTG Cube because it seems like for the kind of people who like high-powered, high synergy cubes, this thing should be very exciting. I think it's maybe people are just worn out by change or power creep. I don't know. I do feel like of all of the Goyfs we're going to talk about, this is probably my favorite or close to my favorite because it feels very aligned to the history of Tarmogoyf, and yet it carves out its own mechanical identity basically just by focusing on your graveyard. And I think that's very elegant little twist on the Tarmogoyf formula.
I don't dislike Nethergoyf. I definitely get what you're saying with being a little bit saddened to see, Tarmogoyf, which was, apparently not supposed to have been printed at 2 mana even, and then Nethergoyf comes charging in here at just 1 black mana. And there is something about it that feels like, oh, Nethergoyf is what Tarmogoyf always could have been. And maybe should have been a black card, like a super aggressive black creature. I enjoy how the escape cost of Nethergoyf really becomes a drawback for it, and a cost in more ways than just paying 3 mana. Like Nethergoyf's power and toughness scale with your graveyard, and you have to shrink your graveyard. You have to sort of consume it and feed it to Nethergoyf to bring it back. And I would think that would create, at least in, maybe not in a lot of modern settings, but at least in like a cube or something, I think that would create a lot of interesting play decisions where you're trying to decide whether it's worth escaping your Nethergoyf if it's going to come back as a 1-2 or a 2-3, and maybe there's other things you'd rather be doing with your graveyard. So I kind of like that ebb and flow quality to it.
To be honest, this versus the Commander Goyfs we'll be talking about in a second, and there are like 5 of them. I think this really illustrates a key difference between the traditional 1v1 Magic style and kind of Commander, in that this card has difficult decisions on it. It is sometimes bad. It asks you to make hard trade-offs in a way that Commander cards can't, because Commander is a multiplayer format. It's just doesn't work. And I think that the fact that this card includes difficult trade-offs in itself, even in a context of a 1-mana power crept Goyf, gets to where my heart is really still like 1v1 Magic. I like that. I like the part of Magic that involves making difficult trade-off decisions with no clear answers. And Nethergoyf, does have that very clearly. All that to me adds up to like a B. Like I like this card. I like it the most of any of the cards we're going to talk about, I think, from here on out.
I think a B's spot on. The art, I don't really feel like there's much to say here. It's a little too defined for me. We keep going back and forth on whether we want our Goyfs to be well defined or abstract, but I don't know. This one's got maybe it reminds me too much of a crocodile, like it's too familiar almost.
I actually like the art a lot here. I like the darkness with the strong backlighting. I actually kind of like that he's a crocodile and he's got these exposed ribs. And if you go look at the cropped art on Scryfall, you can see that he's actually got chains on his wrists that have been broken.
Yeah.
So he's literally escaping. Also, I like that it's a black card, but he's green. It's kind of the inverse of what we've seen with some of the other Goyfs.
That's nice. Yeah. He's clearly in a swamp, but like still maybe this is a green Goyf that passed away and is coming back.
He's kind of like if one of the Connor, what are the guys in Donkey Kong called? The bad guys.
Kremlins, right?
Yes. Okay. He's kind of like a Kremlin got a hold of Bane's juice from the Arkham games. And so I like that. Just he just feels so scary.
Wow.
But also gross.
Please leave a comment if you were able to, without looking anything up, if you were able to piece together what Austin is talking about.
Oh, come on. I think that's pretty clear trail of breadcrumbs.
Okay.
Mental breadcrumbs.
Okay.
All right. So B's all around for Nethergoyf.
Yep. Okay. Here's a great segue. Our next Goyf starts with a B. It's Barrowgoyf. It's Barrowgoyf. 2B, 2 and a B for a star, 1+ star, Lhurgoyf. This is we're getting into the MH3 commander cards here. So star, 1+ star for a Lhurgoyf with Death Touch and Lifelink. Barrowgoyf's power is equal to the number of card types among cards in all graveyards, and its toughness is equal to that number +1. Whenever Barrowgoyf deals combat damage to a player, you may mill that many cards. If you do, you may put a creature card from among them into your hand. Oy, oy, oy. So Barrowgoyf is Tarmogoyf with a bunch of commander-ness stapled on top. So we have we have a color switch to black. Death Touch and Lifelink thrown in there, and then this milling ability that is just going to get more and more ridiculous as the game goes on, that lets you search for creatures in your massive EDH deck. I do not like Barrowgoyf. This just feels so, like, more so than any other card we've looked at today. This feels so pushed.
It feels like it's back to this problem of too many knobs. Like, and too much complexity. I think Magic, you used to read in like Mark Rosewater's column and in his podcast, a lot of fear of complexity, a lot of recognition that Magic is already a very complex game, and the need to tamp down card by card complexity. And I think, like, why does this need Death Touch? Like, I get it sort of thematically that it's a Barrowgoyf, it's an undead or some kind of deadly monster, but like, it's a Goyf, it's going to get big. And if it's not big, like, tough luck. That's life. Like, I don't really think Death Touch is needed here. It's just adding a little bit of overhead. It's adding another word and another keyword and a bit more complexity to a card that is already asking you to track the number of card types in all graveyards. Like, it's already doing quite a bit.
Yeah, I think the application of that classic Tarmogoyf ability to Commander, I feel like, is really just pushing the game even further. Now we're really just like pulling out all of the dead horses to beat here, but it's like pushing the game even further into like being a digital game, right? Like if you're sitting down at a
Ironically, though, Commander is not a digital
yeah,
format,
but like
but
despite
it's
their
very.
best
This is a
efforts,
very complex
yeah,
card.
it's like
Yeah.
and what I don't know, what do you do in your like Goyf commander deck? Like are you having people fan out their graveyards every round so you can like count up the card types
I guess you
until
probably
you've
have a
hit like
dice, and you just.
every card type? Or that just it sounds so annoying. I think you're right. The death touch is really the touch of death here on this card for me, because it's like it doesn't need that, right? Like exactly like you were saying, if Barrowgoyf gets big enough to trade with some of your opponent's bigger creatures, then great. If it doesn't, then that's fine. You got value out of this 3 mana card, presumably. I assume it has death touch so that your opponent doesn't want to block it, and you actually get the milling value. But like, that's not an interesting choice to me. That's not an interesting flow of gameplay. Like maybe there should be times when you can't just swing with your Barrowgoyf every single turn and be guaranteed
Right,
either trade
exactly. Some turns you won't get
or
value.
value. Yeah, like sometimes you play the Barrowgoyf and it just sits there being big until you find an answer to the threat, or you negotiate your way to attacking someone who's maybe your ally so you can get a little bit of mill value. Like create decisions. Like death touch takes away the decision making.
Yeah, I agree.
Ugh.
All right, I'm a D on this thing. I don't really know why I'm not just a straight up F. I think I just don't hate it viscerally enough, but I can't. I don't have any love for it.
I am also a D. I think because of the art. I like the art. Good amount. It's not Goyfy, which is
It's very unsettling, though.
yeah.
I have to hand it
It's
that. I really don't like looking at
it
it.
is disturbing in a way that I like. I like that it's
Yeah,
just like this one is just really all mouth.
all mouth in a kind of human mouth, which is much creepier, it
Yeah,
turns out, than the teethy mouths of other
a kind of
glyphs.
human mouth, kind of human arms with human musculature. Like it's disturbing.
I gotta say, this actually the most nightmarish Goyf since the original Lhurgoyf art from Ice Age? I think it might be for me.
Oh wow,
I think it's the most unsettling to me.
I think you're right. Yeah,
It's definitely up there with Tarmogoyf, because honestly, most of these Goyfs I don't really find scary. I find them kind of cool or monstrous, but this is pretty unpleasant looking.
yeah, and I think unlike some of the other Goyf art we've seen, like the clarity of this art, like the fact that you can actually see all of these features clearly rendered, kind of makes it scarier.
Yeah, I also like that the figure is photorealistic or really super realistic, and then the background is almost pure abstraction. I think that really works for this. It really highlights the central figure strongly.
Yeah,
It's also the most human of all the Goyfs, right? It's basically a human
it's
in
very
terms of its
humanoid.
arms.
Yeah,
Yeah, which just again makes it even more unsettling.
yeah.
All right, well, props to who's this by? Props to Igor Kirilyuk for this. This is a really cool piece. All right, let's move on to Disa the Restless, a 2BRG 5/6 legendary creature human scout.
Hold on.
What is this doing in my Goyf episode? All right, well, Disa the Restless says whenever a Lhurgoyf permanent card is put into your graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, put it onto the battlefield. Whenever one or more creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, create a Tarmogoyf token. And a Tarmogoyf token is Tarmogoyf without a mana cost. Whew, okay. This is where honestly, if you're a commander player and you're somehow still listening to this, we haven't completely alienated you. I would love your take on this and the other commander cards and how you think they'll play out and whether you think this is fun. This one again, it's so over egged, it's so overtuned. I really don't enjoy it. I find it kind of too cute that it creates a Tarmogoyf token. I'm struggling to actually rate this, Connor, because I'm a C on this because I have no feelings about it. I feel like I should, but it just doesn't, I have no emotions. I'm bored by it.
Honestly, I think the only thing I like about this card is how the Goyf that is. Hold on, is this Goyf being ridden or killed?
I think she's writing it.
That just clicked for me. I like that it looks like the original Ice Age Pete Venner's Lhurgoyf.
Oh my God, you're right. It is the Ice Age Lhurgoyf. Okay, that's moved
the
this up a
OG
little bit for me.
Lhurgoyf.
That's cool.
I like that. That is, and I like that Disa looks like a character who could inhabit the original Ice Age.
Oh, you're right. Okay, all right. That is honestly that helps a lot.
So the art pretty good. That's points there. I don't think I like anything else about this card. I don't like, first and foremost, let's start with the mana cost. Start really at the top this time. I don't like how this Jund mana cost sort of seems to pin Lhurgoyfs into being like a Jund tribe or like a Jund type of creature. I mean, that aligns with most of the Lhurgoyfs that we've seen so far, but I feel like this is canonically kicking things like Cantivore and Cognivore out. Not that they're beloved cards, but I think I just don't like the idea that there wouldn't be white and blue Lhurgoyfs.
I think I actually have the opposite reaction, which is I don't know that I like how much it validates black Lhurgoyfs. Like it at heart to me, Lhurgoyf is like a green thing that occasionally splashes into other colors.
Yeah.
But this is the color identity. Okay. All right. Where's the bell? Ding, ding, ding. This is the color identity problem, right? It has to have all these colors because otherwise you can't play it with a lot of the Goyfs.
Yeah, exactly. And this like sort of flavor wise, like pins Goyfs down to being like Jund creatures, which
no more, no less.
Yeah, not a fan of.
Yep.
This sort of has like an altar of the Goyf problem for me, where it just feels like there's a disconnect between the effects on this card, where like when a Lhurgoyf dies, it comes back to the battlefield, and then there's also like creating Tarmogoyf tokens, but because they're not permanent cards, I don't think they would come back, right?
We should have had you lead off this one because I think you just put your finger on what makes me mad of this card, which is there's nothing. It's sort of the opposite of the original Lhurgoyf to me, where I said the flavor text and the art and the name and the mechanics are all like singing together in this really elegant way. No part of this card has anything thematically to do with any other part in my mind.
Nothing works.
Why is she a 5/6? She's actually bigger than almost every other Goyf. Why is that? Like, what does her first effect have to do with any Goyfs except that it's good with other Goyfs? Like, it's just some stuff. What do her two effects have to do with each other? Nothing. There's a sort of elegance, like a design, like almost the elegance of an iPhone. Like there's a design elegance to the best Magic cards. And I think it's just absent from a lot of these cards. And it's certainly absent for this one to me. This is like some interesting things. I'm sure it plays out in a fun way, but it doesn't kind of tickle my brain in the way that Tarmogoyf or Lhurgoyf or even Necrogoyf or Nethergoyf do.
Well, it just like it's just a value engine with there's no real thought, right? Especially given how few Lhurgoyfs there are in the game. Like, I don't even know what a Lhurgoyf commander deck would look like. Like, we're looking at all of them right here. That is not enough for a deck.
It's going to be tough.
Yeah.
I have to give props to the people who will try to make it work. Props for that.
Props for that. But also, why is the Lhurgoyf commander a human scout? And also, why is the like flavor or kind of art or story of this card that Disa is like taming and writing Lhurgoyfs, like we were talking about with Urborg Lhurgoyf?
Another way to put it is like what is happening in the world of Magic with her rules text, especially the first one. The second one I kind of get, like she's somehow assembling a tribe of Tarmogoyfs, although honestly I find that suspect because I feel like Goyfs stand alone. They don't seem like social animals to me. But the first one, whenever a Lhurgoyf permanent card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, put it onto the battlefield, like what is happening there?
Yeah, what is that?
What scouting is she? Like it just doesn't. It's hard to connect to the like world of Magic.
I don't
know. Well, that's some sour grapes. I'm a C on Disa, despite all that, because I think some people are going to have a really good time.
Yeah, and I hope they do. I hope there's some fun decks that come together. But I'm giving Disa a D.
D for Disa.
Yep. Okay. If you thought we were done complaining, then buckle up.
Oh no!
Now
Oh no! I promise we're going to end on a higher note here. Just stay with us.
Well, now we have Polygoyf. Polygoyf is 2 and a G for a star, 1+ Lhurgoyf with trample and myriad. Polygoyf's power is equal to the number of card types among cards in all graveyards, and its toughness is equal to that number +1. I really hate this card. I don't think I like anything about it. I hate myriad as an ability. I hate that it's like
hold on, let's pause on that. Myriad to me is the most inelegant solution to the commander problem.
Yes.
Right? It's like Tarmogoyf isn't good in commander. What about one of them for each opponent?
Yeah, what
it's just so, it feels so clumsy to me. It feels so It's just like sticking a thumb in my eye of how inelegant, how much Commander is a bolt on to the core of Magic.
It's so ham-fisted, right? Just like
Yeah.
we can't figure out a way to really make the scale of an individual creature, or make the power of an individual creature scale to a like multiplayer environment. So let's just make the creature into more creature that can remove the need to decide who you're going to attack. And also like remove the need to have like interesting decisions in Commander.
You know what? Against that though, Connor, isn't there some way that that's more in keeping with traditional Magic than say the Barrowgoyf approach or the Necrogoyf approach of just stapling massive value engines onto every card?
Is it?
I mean, you're still kind of playing with Tarmogoyf in the sense that the heart of Tarmogoyf is attacking with the big dumb creature.
Yeah, I guess.
Hmm.
I don't know, but uh, I think I just hate that ability too much to redeem Polygoyf. I don't like the art here either. The only possibly redeeming feature of the art for me is that it reminds me a little bit of Dripping Tongue Zubera,
Oh my goodness,
which I love.
it is very Kamigawa spirit-esque,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah,
You know, now that you've said that, maybe part of why I like Goyfs is a lot of them are kind of Kamigawa spirit-y.
a little bit. Yeah, like kind of shapeless monstrosities. But I'm not a fan of this one. I don't. It does not read as a Goyf to me, and I don't like how I don't even like the marriage of flavor and abilities here bothers me. Like, oh, it has myriad, so it's a Polygoyf, so it has a lot of heads. It has one head for each other player that you're gonna attack. Like, come on, have like a little subtlety to this thing.
I don't think I mind this card as much as you do. I feel like it's kind of it does yeah, it does what it says on the tin, but that is not a bad thing. I don't really love that it has trample.
But that, I mean, that's another example of like tuning. Yeah, like, oh, we want the Tarmogoyf that can attack the whole table, but we want to make sure that you get the value.
Right, we don't want the tokens player to trumpet. We don't want to have bad cards.
Right. We don't want you to feel bad that you attacked everybody, but it didn't do anything. So we're going to give it
Yeah.
trample so you can make sure to get a little damage in there. You don't need that. You don't need that on a 3 mana card.
Yeah, it's back to this question of difficult decisions. Like, what is the difficult decision in this
Yes.
card?
There is no decision here. You play the Polygoyf, it gets big, it attacks everybody. Like, you don't even have the decision of who you're going to attack.
Yeah, yeah, interesting.
It's just go face, go 3 face. Also,
What's your rating on this, Connor?
just
Go ahead.
before we finish up, and this is a global comment, so I think it's fair to put this at the feet of Polygoyf too. I know that there are sort of different sets between MH3 and the Commander set, but it really bothers me that Nethergoyf only looks at your graveyard, and all of these Goyfs are the traditional Tarmo ability of looking at all graveyards because it's Commander, of course. But there's too much like switching whose graveyard you're looking at.
This is, I think, is a general problem with the Goyf tribe, right? Is
Yeah,
there's a lot of subtle, right? We have the Odyssey Goyfs that are just totally messing all this up. Not to mention Detritivore, who's
Detritivore is
double, triple. We've got Ultra of the Goyf giving +X instead of the, +X +1 +X. Like, if you want internal consistency, Goyfs are not the tribe for you, which maybe is fine. Maybe that's part of their identity, just like how they all look different.
All right, I guess maybe I'm fine with that set to set, but within like the same set or set of sets here.
Okay, what's your rating?
Polygoyf's an F if I didn't make that clear.
Woof. I'm a D on this.
Okay.
All right, let's go to Pyrogoyf. Pyrogoyf is 3R for a creature Lhurgoyf, */1+*. Pyrogoyf's power is equal to the number of card types among cards in all graveyards, and its toughness is equal to that number +1. Whenever Pyrogoyf or another Lhurgoyf creature enters the battlefield under your control, that creature deals damage equal to its power to any target. So this is Flametongue Kavu plus a Goyf. I like that the art feels like a callback to Flametongue Kavu to me. The pose, I think, is identical to Flametongue Kavu. And of course, the effect here is very similar to Flametongue Kavu's effect. I suppose I should say what Flametongue Kavu is, because I'm not sure it's quite as much of a touchstone for the last 10 years of Magic as it was for the 10 years before that. Flametongue Kavu is 3R for a 4/2. Kavu, when it enters the battlefield, deals 4 to target creature. Okay, so the good is I like the callback. I like that this plays with the growing of the Goyf in an interesting way. And then it has cost tacked on accordingly. In fact, the only thing I don't like about this is the or another Lhurgoyf thing. And I don't like that basically for selfish reasons. I think that makes a lot of sense for Commander. And this, of course, is a Commander card. It's literally in the Commander set. In a cube context, I think it's sort of undesirable because it adds complexity and potentially confusion to the draft. Like I have a lot of newbie drafters for my cube. And, this is, I think, definitely going to lead some people to think, oh, now I need to watch for other Lhurgoyfs, which is not true. This is the only Lhurgoyf you're ever going to get in this slot in cube. Against that, I love the callbacks. I love the scaling. I think it's an elegant card in the way we haven't seen with a lot of the ones we talked about before this. The two parts of this card are interacting in a way that makes a lot of sense. So overall, I like this card.
Yeah, I actually like Pyrogoyf a lot. I think a big part of that is the Flame Tongue Kavu callbacks, the same mana cost. Like,
yeah, we're a sucker for a Flame Tongue Kavu.
Yeah, that's like one of my all-time favorite cards. So I love that. I don't really mind another Lhurgoyf entering the battlefield under your control. I definitely get that that's very much a false signal in the cube setting. Like you're going to be looking for other Lhurgoyfs that don't exist. But if someone's more familiar with the cube, I think like Pyrogoyf can still be an interesting card to play with in that setting. I think the reason I like this so much more than the other Commander Goyfs we've seen so far, and I just want to put it out there, I have had fun playing Commander before. Like I think it could be a very fun format.
It's just not our favorite.
Yeah, it's just not our favorite.
Yeah.
But what I think I like about Pyrogoyf and what makes it like the opposite of Polygoyf to me is that there are like real decisions with this card. It costs 4 mana, which, is like not as significant in Commander as in like most 1v1 formats, but like that's still a cost. In the Commander setting specifically, you're going to have a lot of targets for Pyrogoyf and whatever Lhurgoyfs you're playing to back it up, right? Like this can deal damage to any target. That can be a creature, that can be a planeswalker, that can be another player. And I think that creates many more interesting decisions just by virtue of the number of targets that you have to choose from. That creates so many more decisions than something like Polygoyf, where it's just play it as dumb thing and attack everybody.
I do think there's something about, I think I've mentioned it over the previous ones. The more I look at these, the less I like the idea of Goyfs being friends. Like, I just think they shouldn't really benefit each other, which makes them awkward as a commander tribal thing. But I think I'm okay with that. Like, I just don't think Goyfs should want to play around with other Goyfs. I think they should be trying to eat other Goyfs, if anything.
This is the only actual Lhurgoyf creature that cares about other Lhurgoyfs.
Correct. This is the only one that actually makes friends.
Yeah, I think that's fair. They're not friendly, especially with each other.
That said, I like this card quite a bit. I'm only a B on it, although that feels sort of ungenerous. I honestly suspect I'll be putting this in my cube.
Yeah, Pyrogoyf seems pretty fun.
What's your rating, Connor?
I give this an A.
Wow.
Okay, let's finish up with not actually a Lhurgoyf, but a Tarmogoyf Nest. This is 2 and a green for a Kindred Enchantment Lhurgoyf Aura.
It's quite a type line.
That's quite a type line. It's an enchant land. An enchanted land has pay 1 and a green, tap, create a Tarmogoyf token. This is a really tough one to evaluate for me. I think what I'm struggling with is I don't really love the idea of the Tarmogoyf token in the first place. I know it's supposed to be sort of honoring Tarmogoyf, but it feels almost like it's insulting it. Like Tarmogoyf is just another goblin or
Connor, that's exactly what I was going to say. If this and Disa feel like a diminishment of Tarmogoyf's legacy.
Yeah.
Like from ruling over modern, he's been reduced to, as you said, a goblin token.
Yeah, put some respect
like this
on
is
him.
Squirrel Nest.
Yeah, like you're right. Yeah, like a nest.
It is actually Squirrel Nest. Hold on. It is 3 mana. Oh my goodness.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
I don't want that. I don't like that. Like, look, what has become of our boy?
Yeah, it's like a fun idea, but yeah, it just feels like it's cementing a shift, right? It's like, you know what? To make this viable in Commander, we have to give you a Tarmogoyf every turn.
Yes.
Just straight up.
So all of that on the one hand, and then on the other hand, thinking I don't think this is as crazy or stupid as it maybe looks in Commander. Like, you have to pay 3 mana. You have to basically give up a mana producing land to put this on to make Tarmogoyf tokens. Like, I'm thinking you play this on 3, and then on 4 you're tapping 3 lands to create a token.
Yep.
So like I don't think it's like ridiculously
I think it's
busted.
probably eminently fair in Commander.
Yeah, but that also kind of makes me sad. Like just a Tarmogoyf is just a thing that you crank out every turn. That's a pretty fair card. It's not going to be all that difficult for your opponents to deal with, probably. And that's what's become of Tarmogoyf in
Maybe we have
2024.
this wrong. Maybe it's that, you know what, even in Commander, when you play 8 Tarmogoyfs, you become a force to be reckoned with. And this is the way you can do that. Like, aren't some Commander games going to end when everyone sleeps on Tarmogoyf Nest?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you have like 10 Tarmogoyfs because you're doing shenanigans with untapping the land, and then you win?
Yeah.
I mean, not a lot, but that's honoring Tarmogoyf's legacy in some ways.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Okay, while you ponder that, I really like the art here, and what I like about the art is that it manages to simultaneously get across the idea that this is kind of a landy thing, right? It looks like land art. It gets across the idea of the enchantment because there's all this sort of green magical energy flowing throughout this landscape. And then, of course, it gets across that this is making Tarmogoyfs because you can see Tarmogoyf in the background, but he's enough in the background that you're not going to look at this and think it's a creature. So I think it's just a purely functional piece of magic art, like laying aside the aesthetics, which I think are also quite good. I think as a functional piece of art, this gets across what the card is doing in a really effective way.
Very well put. I also appreciate that like Tarmogoyf is far enough back that not only does it not read as a creature card, but like you don't discern that much detail of the Tarmogoyf, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's part of the Goyf's legacy. And in fact, I think like at card size, without looking at it, for a second, it could just be a giant tree in the background.
Yeah.
It's only those upturned horns that make you go, wait a second.
So you get a little jump scare.
Do you say jump scare? A little jump scare.
Yep.
Yeah. Huh.
So I had this at a C. I'm kind of feeling like I might go up to a B. I don't think I haven't been very generous in this episode with upward revision. So I'm gonna go up to a B.
You know what? And I'm going to give this an A. I just think it's fun. I think this is a card that will tickle people's brains. I think it's going to make people new to Tarmogoyf's legacy look at it and go, "What's a Tarmogoyf?" So, you know what? I think it's pretty cool.
Okay. And I mean, when's the next time we're going to see a Kindred Enchantment Lhurgoyf aura?
I think it's extremely unlikely we'll see it repeated.
Probably going to be a while.
Well, Connor, I've got a 16-person commander pod coming up, so I need to work up some kind of way to track card types, number of creature cards, number of instants, number of sorceries, number of lands, number of non-basic lands, number of enchantments across all those graveyards. So I really got to get going. I think we got to call it on this episode.
Don't forget your own graveyard.
Oh man, my own graveyard. Thank you. If you enjoyed the show, if you stuck with us through this whole 2+ hour journey into the history of Goyfs, I think you probably enjoyed it. It would mean a lot to us if you want to subscribe to us on YouTube or in your favorite podcast app. Share it with a Magic playing friend, like it, subscribe. You all know the drill from all your podcasts, but genuinely, this is a pretty small show. You could find that if you look on YouTube. We'd love to reach more people with this, I think, really important life insight that we have to share here on Clock Spinning. So it'd mean a lot if you want to share it. And also, if you have any thoughts, feedback, memories of any of the cards we talked about, ideas for future episodes, shoot us a comment or email us clockspinningpodcast@gmail.com. We always love to hear your feedback. We'll be back soon with, I don't know, maybe an art review. Maybe we'll finally pick up our Kamigawa set review. Maybe we'll do a deep dive into orgs. You'll just have to find out. But until then, I'm Austin.
And I'm Connor.
Thanks for listening.